Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Matt Lindsay, president of MATHER Economics. Welcome to the second day of our symposium. We appreciate you spending time with us. I know it's everyone has a busy schedule today, and in general, we're very fortunate to have almost 500 people that have registered for this three-day symposium. We had a great day yesterday. I'll go over the kind of a recap of that in just one moment. I just wanted to share, though, that the reason we have these symposiums is really to share best practices from the leading companies in the area of subscriber lifecycle management. It's really we're very fortunate to work with a number of companies in a variety of industries in this area, and we really enjoy bringing people together to have this opportunity to share best practices and benchmarks and good ideas. So we're hopeful that you can take at least one good idea away from the speakers you hear today that you can take back to your business and apply it and really make a meaningful impact on your business. So I just wanted to go quickly, just recap. We had a phenomenal day one yesterday. We had some great speakers. Tony Hunter spoke. He's the CEO of McClatchy. He really emphasized that subscriptions are the growth engine for the industry and kind of gave a recap of how McClatchy is utilizing that North Star metric to align all of their divisions on a single set of goals. He emphasized they create value through their customers and really strive to try a lot of different good ideas and implement them quickly to see what works. He also mentioned that they had a 79, they have been testing a lot of price increases on digital subscribers as well, and that's been very successful. And I should add that these sessions are all recorded and the presentations will be available. So if you don't happen to see them live, we'll be posting those and sharing them. Pete Doucette, the Chief Revenue Officer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, also emphasized the need to drive relationships with data. Their goal is to drive known first-party data from 1% of their audience today to 15% in the next year, and ultimately try to get to 50% of their known audience. Paul Verwilt, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Media House, who's a very extensive partner with MATHER Economics, they have been working on a subscription engine that uses the consumer centricity to establish that relationship. Again, their focus is to convert unknown to known users, and they've been doing that for quite some time. Juan Pardinas, who's the editor-in-chief of Reforma, which is a leading newspaper in Mexico, really he said content is king, segmentation is queen, and the audience is God, and again, had a very compelling story about how they are using data to communicate to their customers. He said, "In God we trust, everyone else must bring data." And lastly, we had Lori Truitt, who's the VP of Consumer Growth at Time, formerly of Gannett, which is the company that our first speaker will be from today, Mayur Gupta. So she is now at Time Magazine and has shared a lot of the ways they're using audience data to connect with their audience and drive subscriber growth through newsletters, but also through content in the form of pictures, videos, as well as text. So she also mentioned that dynamic pricing is working. The magazine industry, in her mind, is actually a little bit behind when it comes to pricing, and partly that's due to the nature of the way that industry works today, when they have a rate base, but that's a longer conversation. But anyways, wonderful first day, and we're looking forward to the speakers today. My next and last slide will be to introduce our moderator, Nikki Purcell. Nikki was actually a speaker at our first symposium in Atlanta back in 2014 when she was the Chief Digital Officer and SVP at the Dallas Morning News. And amazingly, that doesn't seem like that long ago, but we were very excited to have her as a moderator today. She moved from the Dallas Morning News to be the CEO at LifeBlue in Dallas, which is a company we collaborated with on several projects while she was there. And then now she is the president of Insight, a technology agency that is really creating some fabulous designs and focusing on user experiences and building them in a flexible, sustainable way. So with that, I will turn it over to Nikki. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks for inviting me to moderate. I'm excited to be part of this session, and happy Friday, everyone. Really excited to be here, and as Matt mentioned, we had a phenomenal lineup of speakers yesterday, but we are not going to shortchange you today. We have great presentations coming up to really keep you engaged. And so I just want to cover, just before we jump in, a little bit of the housekeeping information. So just to remind you, the sessions are recorded, as Matt mentioned, and that's important. So as you take notes and you're looking to recapture something that you may have heard earlier, we will actually send you an email following the symposium so that you have links to all of the recordings. Also, we encourage you to ask questions. So as Matt mentioned, this is here for you to be able to take something impactful away, and we want to make sure you get the most out of it. So if you look at the Zoom screen at the very bottom, you see an option called chat. If you would click on that and then submit your questions that way, we have the opportunity to see them come in, and we'll funnel those directly to the speakers following their presentation. So we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can reach out to Mather IT, or you can actually email Shelly directly, and it's shelly@mathereconomics.com. You can see her email address there. And as mentioned, we will email you the link to the sessions, as well as the presentations from the speakers who have been willing to grant us permission, because I know there's a lot of data that people are sharing. Some of it is confidential, revenue numbers, et cetera. So we have versions of those that we'll get to you if you want the actual presentations as well. And don't forget that you can watch recordings of these on Mather's YouTube channel. And we would love to have you engaged with us from a social media perspective. So please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and use the hashtag Mather Symposium throughout the 3 days that we're together for any thoughts you have, or key nuggets that you want to share with the rest of the audience. So let me just give you a brief overview of what you can expect. As Matt mentioned, today is day 2. So we're starting out at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll go straight till 2. We'll have the same time frame on Monday. So we'll have a brief weekend in between, and then we'll jump right back in on Monday. And the format really stays the same for the next 2 days. We're going to have a keynote address that kicks off the day. And then we'll have a variety of presentations, interviews, some panel discussions. And then we're going to round out each day with an industry spotlight. So I think you'll find that we really hit a home run with today's industry spotlight. So taking a look at today's agenda, I get the opportunity to introduce Mayur Gupta as our keynote speaker, and I'll do that in just a moment. Following that, we're actually going to kick right into a case study. So we keep talking about data and how important it is to have success with the data that you're collecting. And for that, what we want to do is actually talk about a project that's helping people benchmark data. Because if you don't have a place to start, or even as Tony Hunter mentioned in his keynote yesterday with how do you make sure you look at external forces, benchmarking data is key. We have intentionally put in a break for the session today, and you'll note it's a small break, just about 5 minutes, and that's intentional. For those of you who are just going to get up, maybe stretch your legs, we also invite you to participate in our poll. And so we just have a question that we want to throw out to our audience members, and we'd love your feedback to that. And at the conclusion of the break, we'll actually go ahead and share the results. Following our break, we have Claire Overstall from The Economist, who's going to talk about products for us. So excited to hear her. And I've had an opportunity to take a look at each of their presentations, and you're in for a treat. We have a lot of good information. The next session we have is going to be Aaron Kontrak and Sammy Pappert, who are going to talk about credit card fees, something that we often don't think of, but saving money on those fees is where their area of expertise lies, and both are going to share different ways that they've done that. And then, as I mentioned, we round out with a spotlight on a particular industry. In this case, it's on sports. So we're fortunate to have John Tierney of Major League Baseball, who's going to bring us home. So with that, I want to be able to turn it over and get right into the meat of this content. As I mentioned, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote address speaker today. It's Mayur Gupta, and he is the Chief Marketing and Chief Strategy Officer for Gannett. Welcome, Mayur.
Thank you so much, Nikki. So glad to be here. Such a wonderful panel, and I'm kind of bummed that I missed those very interesting and I'm sure very insightful sessions yesterday. I was really inspired by, I forgot what all analogies Matt shared, God, kings, and queens. So I'm going to figure out in the recording. I will check out what that was. But that was pretty inspirational. So I'm going to test my clicker to make sure it's working. Let me see. There you go. Now it did. Okay. So brand purpose and growth. And many of you may wonder what's so special about it, because for all practical purposes, brand purpose and growth is intertwined. And you build brands in response to your purpose. And once you are living that brand, growth organically happens. Unfortunately, the ground reality for at least many of us is not the same. I think in a growth at all cost world that we have been living in, at least for the last 15 years, brand and purpose, or purpose and profitability, brand and growth, brand and performance, they've kind of been on the opposite indices, and we've had to make those choices every single day. And that's one of the biggest challenges for our category and our industry as we evolve the core business model. So we'll talk a lot about that today. But before I go there, I usually like to spend just a minute on my journey and my background. I grew up in India, and like an average middle-class kid, I had no idea what I was doing in life. And back then, if you needed a job, you did computer science. So I majored in computer science. I was an engineer, hence started my career at Sapien, which is a fantastic alma mater for me, and learned pretty much everything there, and spent almost 12 years before I moved to Kimberly-Clark, led digital and e-commerce there, was the first chief marketing technologist, then into healthcare, and then was fortunate enough to work in a wonderful growth, like one of the iconic brands of at least the last 20 years, Spotify, and then was a CMO at Freshly, and now at this wonderful place with an incredible mission to build communities where people and local businesses thrive, Connect, the US Affiliate Network. The reason I like to share this is if you have better things to do than listening to an engineer telling you how best to market, this is your last chance, because that is what's about to happen. But like I shared, as I came to this industry, at least from organizations that were extremely customer obsessed, one of my biggest realizations was there's a fundamental shift that we are going through as a category, which is, besides all the things on subscriptions, et cetera, and the business models, but the fundamental shift is that we are evolving from a category that is obsessed with, or historically obsessed with, audience attention, where the business model considers audience and eyeballs to be the core product, and that's the supply side. And on demand side, you have advertisers pretty much pay for it. That has been a century-old media business. And I think I won't be wrong if I said that we are all now evolving rather quickly that business model where we truly put the customer at the center, and we're shifting the obsession from user traffic to user value, where we are shifting the obsession from eyeballs to customer and what it means for them. And the core product evolves from audience attention to core content. And we are shifting from making only brands and advertisers pay to now elevating that customer experience every single day so that we can inspire the customers to pay for it. And that, while it sounds very simple, on paper, I'm sure we all can vouch, is a very hard and steep mountain to climb. But that is the world we live in. And I'm sure with all the brands and products we consume every single day, that's the kind of experience we drive. And once you do that, the magical part is once you're able to build that hook, once you're able to live that customer obsession every single day, like a day one organization, there's so many concentric circles and incremental value adds that you can build that maximize the lifetime value, that maximizes the lifetime revenue. But underneath all of this is a firm realization that subscription is not just a business model. It is not just a different way to sell your core product. It's a mindset. It's a cultural shift. It is the DNA, that mindset of being customer obsessed, the mindset of trying to figure out how do I add incremental value, not just to the customer who's at risk, but even your most loyal customer, because you know that the only way you prevent the user from leaving your ecosystem is when you raise that emotional bar higher and higher every single time. And there are incredible brands that have done that extremely successfully, like Amazon, and we all have read and heard a lot about how they came about the idea of Amazon Prime. But that is the bar that is being set, which means that for many of our legacy brands that have done an incredible job over the last century, we are almost back to the drawing board to reprove and recreate the product market fit. Much like a startup, we are all in that 0 to 1 state, or at least some of us. I shouldn't speak for everybody. At the very least, Gannett is, and our ecosystem of flagship and incredible local and nationwide brands, we are challenging ourselves to now operate like a startup, to evolve from an incumbent to a disruptor, where we believe that the only moat we have now is going to be our ability to move faster than anybody else. And I feel that a lot of that rhythm to move fast and create a lot of the disruption and build growth started back in 2007, 2008, where Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook were struggling to break the 50 million monthly active user mark And then they brought on this growth team, which was led by Chamath Palihapitiya. And they created, in many ways, they created this euphoria around growth at all costs. And while it was great and has done some wonderful things for Facebook and many other growth companies, originating from Silicon Valley and otherwise, interestingly enough, it has also created a challenge where over the last 10 to 15 years, in that inertia of growth at all costs, many brands or many growth companies lost the focus on its soul, lost the focus on the brand itself, and where the soul kind of disappeared, and everything became all about the CAC, all about the discount, all about the pace at which I can bring more users in. And that has taught some very basic and core lessons that we are applying now at Gannett to make sure that purpose for us is not just a facade, that growth for us will not come in isolation from our purpose or the brand, where we actually are challenging ourselves to think about how purpose will drive profitability for us, how strong, resilient brands will ultimately drive higher growth, more efficient acquisition, higher retention rates, and higher LTV through our efforts across the board. And some of the lessons, like I said, that we've learned is first and foremost, as part of that customer obsession, is that belief system that the only moat we will have as an organization is now our ability to move faster than the competition. It's the rate of iteration. It is going to be based on our mindset of being fearless and our ability to experiment, test, and learn, and focus on outcomes and not outputs. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then secondly, we're also very conscious that when you move at that pace, when you build that agility where you are pivoting multiple times, where you're testing and learning and experimenting, inevitably you end up creating chaos. But what is very important to become a disruptor is where you create a culture that is strong enough where people thrive in that chaos, where your intent is not to calm the chaos down. Of course, it's a conscious chaos, so it's not uncontrollable chaos, but which also means that you have to invest equally in evolving and building that culture through more transparency, more communication, and more conversation, but also creating a safe environment where you celebrate failures just as much as you celebrate successes. And needless to say that yes, we all can have those incredible strategies about our North Stars, about what we want to do, but until we have that foundation of that strong culture that cultivates that mindset and behavior, it is going to eat your strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. To the point where you no longer feel that purpose and growth is a choice. As a matter of fact, if you sit in marketing or if you sit in product, you all believe that your core purpose is to drive growth. As a matter of fact, you get it to the point where your purpose is to apply that mission, is to apply that vision of who you are and why you exist as a catalyst to grow your business. Where, as for example, for marketing, its mission is now to apply that purpose to grow the business, to connect with the user base, to use the purpose as a guiding force to influence your product roadmap and influence your tone of voice and everything else you create as an organization. And what I mean by growth, and the purpose to grow, it is not just the lower funnel or quantitative measure of how many subscribers you have, but it is a concentric, flywheels of growing the brand, growing the user base, growing the user value, or in other words, these three always on flywheels of creating new demand, capturing that demand, and retaining that demand. Now, it's not either or. It is not that, why don't I just focus on lower funnel acquisition and retention, and I'm going to build the brand once I've reached a certain pinnacle? Because the moment you do that, you're only backing yourself on the power of functional and utilitarian value. You are not building that emotional value, which prevents you from creating new demand and expanding your total addressable market. And that is why the investment in that core brand is just as quintessential as your ability to acquire and retain your audience. And a fundamental shift in order for many organizations, especially marketing and growth functions, because marketing is one function within the C-suite that has disrupted and evolved more than any other function in the last 13 to 14 or 15 years with the influx and intertwining of data and technology. The biggest shift we all have to make as marketers is a mindset shift from thinking about outputs to outcomes. There is so much euphoria and excitement about campaigns and the things we do, and very little about the impact it creates both on the customer and their life and their behavior, as well as on the business and the business outcome. And that is a fundamental shift that we all have to make in how we think about the purpose and the operating model of marketing and growth in any organization. And I'm sure if many of you who are working on very aggressive goals, and either in a startup or a direct-to-consumer business, it's an unfortunate situation where brand in today's world, in a world of growth at all costs, has almost become a stigma, where if you're spending $5 or the $100, one of the big questions you get asked is, what is the ROI on that investment? And what is the return? Almost to the point where being on the brand team is almost a fearful environment because it is hard to measure and it is hard to prove the addressability of that effort. But that's where I feel as marketers, we have to get creative and we have to converge and get innovative with how do we measure the impact of that investment in building an emotional brand, in building that resilient brand? How do we identify more proxy and indirect KPIs that do not have to wait for 6 to 9 months to figure out the lift in your brand awareness or consideration? The challenge for us is how do we connect brand to business? How do we connect purpose profitability and measure that with more short-term KPIs, whether they are direct or indirect, which I like to call proxy KPIs. So I'm going to shift gears now with all that theory, which I'm sure on paper makes a lot of sense. But how do you enable that in your daily life? When we are all scrambling for those numbers at the end of each week, each month, and each quarter. So there are 5 core principles that I would love to share that I challenge myself to apply with varying degrees of success or failure. One of them, or the first one, is a shift, a fundamental shift from perfection to experimentation. And what I mean by that, there's no such thing as perfection anymore in business, let alone in marketing, which means that everything you do has to be based on test and learn and the agility and the velocity of that, of your experimentation cycles. Instead of waiting for 3 months to come up with the best creative idea and the best creative campaign and the best creative assets, whichever part of the funnel, you'd rather create 4 variations and 5 variations, come up with a test plan and test and learn, and let the customer and the data tell you what works and what doesn't work. The key is not only the ability to have those creative assets in the test plan, but do you have the velocity? Do you have the supply chain to test and learn in a cross-functional way that breaks on the traditional silos of creative, data, science, performance, media, and so on? So the key magic happens at the intersection of all those isolated functions. The second principle is that you have to, or we all have to, move away from measuring the impact of the outputs to measuring success against outcomes. What I mean by that is, one example that I like to share always is, instead of celebrating the launch of a campaign, which happens very often, how many of us are actually celebrating the impact that that campaign had to create? And that is the mindset. How many of us measure the success of how many people came to our platform? Of course, as a media company, that makes sense because that perhaps the number of visitors is your North Star KPI, but no longer. As a subscription-led economy, the number of visitors is only a leading indicator. What matters is how much time are they really spending? Our understanding of a certain type of behavior that they're performing on the platform, which ultimately leads them down through the journey to one day eventually subscribe and pay. So there is that gap between the output KPIs and the absolute North Star KPI in terms of the number of subscribers. The magic happens right in the middle, because those are the levers that your growth teams have to optimize every single day. The second challenge that most of us face, especially in the function of marketing, is when you end up spending 80% of your dollar in the unmeasurable part of marketing, which is more top of funnel, which is hard to measure and quantify, and only 20% that moves the needle. And the magic there is that you shift that you shift that distribution where you start to invest 80% of your dollar to get to 100% of your goal. Because the moment you did that, now you have the $20 that you can truly spend in what is absolutely irrational, serendipitous, and that is what builds the emotional connection. But if you flip it, that is when the monkey gets on your back and people start to ask the question, what is your true ROI on all this spend? And then third is, in order for all of us to be able to operate towards those outcomes, it is very important to organize ourselves around outcomes and not outputs. And whether we like it or not, the experiences that we deliver are a direct reflection of how we are organized and how we operate. So if our existing operating model and our organizational structure is siloed, where we are all focused on respective OKRs and KPIs and respective different individual outcomes, we are inevitably going to create and deliver broken and fragmented experiences that will not move the user behavior. And at Gannett, at least within the marketing organization, we think about ourselves as a combination of capability builders, who are the horizontals, who are building world-class capabilities and learning every single day. How do we build new muscle? But then the flywheels are basically the functions that are responsible for those outcomes, for those KPIs. So growing the brand, the user value, creating new demand, capturing new demand. But then we've also come up with a model of building cross-functional pods where you bring product managers, you bring data scientists, you bring engineers, marketeers, and content editors in one single pod, and now they share the same outcome, they share the same OKRs, and that delivers magic, because at the end, the customer experiences and the customers themselves, they sit at that intersection. They're not operating in the isolated worlds of technology, data science, or storytelling. And very importantly, for marketing and growth, it is important to drive visibility and transparency and be very clear about what will be those measurable outcomes. So we have now institutionalized objectives and key results across the organization to align ourselves cross-functionally on where we are headed, what success looks like month over month, quarter over quarter. And we are using that as a yardstick, not only to create cross-functional collaboration, but also making sure we are making the right choices in terms of our prioritization across the board. Because there's so many things that we can do, but it does not mean that those are the things that we absolutely should do at that moment. So this is an example of the Gannett rhythm that we've created, driven by our global strategy and ops team, where we have a combination of committees and pods. At the end, all of the work that's happening on the ground with thousands of employees who work for Gannett, now laddering up to our North Star goals and North Star KPIs. Fourth, very importantly, with an ever-evolving ecosystem that we are all sitting on top of, especially in the world of growth and marketing and content distribution, where there is a massive proliferation of channels and touch points through which the consumers engage offline and online, it is very important to build an engine where all the parts are stitched and connected. And what I mean by that is, yes, we are all going after data. And yes, some of you and some of us are probably challenging ourselves to create a supply chain of data to create insights, if you're lucky. But then some of us are now struggling to figure out, okay, I do have the insights, but I don't have the remaining supply chain to take action of that insight. So I know I'm about to lose this user. I know this user is waiting for this content, but those piping is missing to be able to communicate that user and send that user that piece of content just in time before they give up and lose and go somewhere else. Because the barrier to enter another ecosystem or the barrier to actually earn loyalty is much, much higher, which means that it's very important that we are absolutely focused on the underlying engine and the ecosystem where the pipes aren't broken, where if you have data, you have an ability to translate that into insight. If you have insight, you have an ability to take action and test and learn, but reach that consumer the moment you want to engage, because there is not much time between the customer making a choice from brand A to brand B. And that's a very high bar. And I'm sure we're all battling and struggling with that notion. And whether we like it or not, this is much of what many of our ecosystems feel like. There are many organizations that don't even have all the parts yet. They are still building all the parts. And there are many who somehow have managed to build all the parts or the machinery, but they haven't yet stitched it all together. And then in that process of stitching and running fast, sometimes, everyone has a different end state. So it is very much possible that you have the tire of a Jeep, but the chassis of a truck, and you're trying to stitch it all together. That is why it's very important to bring the mindset of systems thinking. You want to have a culture that is able to do top down and bottom up. You want to know where you are going 5 years from now, but you want to be able to plan week over week, day over day, and month over month. And that's a fun part of systems thinking and design thinking principles, where while you have a North Star, you have a vision, but you have the speed and the agility to pivot every single week, if you had to. And fifth one, I promise, is the last principle and lesson, is it's often easy to talk about data. And as more and more businesses become more direct to consumer and have plethora of first party data, it is very easy to get overshadowed and overwhelmed by the first party data. But here's a big difference. The first party data tells us what the users are doing and perhaps where they are doing it. What it does not give us is why. And that is where we have to think about data more holistically. We have to invest and build that user obsession that will dive into the why, that will apply the qual and the quant, that will value that secondary and the primary research just as much as the value of the first party data, because the magic happens at that intersection when you apply all kinds of insights to not only understand what the users are doing, but even more importantly, understand the causality and not just correlation of why they're doing it, because that gives you the best chance to change that human behavior, to prevent that outcome, and to lead the users to the desired outcome. And I'll actually lie, I have one more principle, which I didn't number because I wanted to, 5 sounds more cool, is lastly, move away from the mindset of campaigns. The customer do not have a start and end date. That mom who's looking for the next pack of diapers is not waiting for the Christmas campaign to get 20% off. She's doing it at 10:40 at night, when the kids have gone to sleep. She's finally relaxing on an iPad or a phone. And if you're not there in that moment, if you're not always on, you're going to lose her. And that is the opportunity that we have. It's very hard because we're all used to what we used to call the product value of death, which is if your traffic is slowing down, if your growth is slowing down, what do? You launch another feature. What is the outcome by the end of this process? Is an unusable app. What do you do when you're a marketer and when you run behind numbers? You launch a campaign. And what happens by the end of it? There is so much confusion and you become a campaign obsessed organization versus creating a flywheel where you're constantly listening, where you're constantly testing, and you're constantly engaging and building an always on engine that is building community, that is having conversation with the user, as opposed to a one directional throwing of ads and offers to the user. That's a hard journey to be on, but that is the bar that the customer is setting today, and we don't really have an option. And lastly, no matter what we do, with all the euphoria around data that we all have access to, please let's make sure that we don't let data destroy our soul, because at the end, the brands that are going to survive are the ones that are going to create that culture and emotional connection with their audiences. Thank you.
I definitely believe this is going to be one of those presentations that people are going to want to refer back to, because it's super helpful to think the way that you guys are thinking. So one of the things that I was fascinated about, and I kind of took a note of when you first started talking, was the evolution and how you guys are genuinely transitioning your mindset. And what I mean by that is that, I think this is kind of a funny thing to think about, but there was this question that people used to ask, which said, what are the industries that refer to their customers as users? Really only web digital companies and drug dealers. And so when we think about companies and, us thinking of audiences as eyeballs and just someone to chase versus giving them something of value, it's a very different way of thinking. And so I'd like your perspective on how easy of a sell that's been internally in the culture to make that shift.
So that's a great question. I don't think I've heard that before, the drug dealership part, but it's a great question, Nikki, because I absolutely agree that it's a very hard jump. Fortunately, at Gannett, we had been at that inflection point for so many years that personally, I was very grateful that by the time I came on the board and then I finally took on an operating role last year, we were almost emotionally and mentally there to make that leap. Now, the question was only how well we are able to execute, which is the journey that we are on with speed and agility. But mentally, we were there where we wanted to bring that mindset shift because we all realized and have strongly believed that the future of any business is going to be determined and influenced by the amount of user value that we provide and how every single person, regardless of the role they play, when they come back in the morning, are we thinking about data that tells us how do I add that one more level of incremental value, where we are not waiting for the user to tell us in a survey response that I wanted a faster horse, or I wanted Amazon Prime, but how are we leveraging data to preempt and predict your needs even before you know you need it? Now, where we are, we have that intent. We absolutely want to be there, but we know that we are very early on in that 100-yard touchdown, right? So we've evolved from being very transparent here, from being unconsciously incompetent to become consciously incompetent. But we are on our way to become consciously competent and hopefully someday unconsciously competent, and that'll be euphoria.
I love that analogy. Okay, so one of the questions that's come in, I don't know if we need to go back to this slide or if it's just kind of difficult to toggle back, but you'll probably know which one she's referencing. Liz Kennedy asked, can you unpack the engine slide a bit more? Because I think this is something that piqued people's interest. We'd love for you to take us through that.
Yeah, see, this is an outcome of an engineer pretending to be a marketeer. You only see arrows and circles and boxes because those are the only dimensions I was trained on. So I love that question. What I mean by this is, if you are marketing or growth or even product, one thing that stays always on 365 days a year is the flywheel. And let's unpack it if you want to be tactical so that we can take one thing back, is your journey, your process to ingest data and understand the why for your core cohorts and segments. That is not a 3-month process that happens once a year in Q2 or Q3. That should be happening every single day with your data team. They should be constantly looking at, every day, every week, the user behavior. And I'm assuming you all have some kinds of dashboards or Excel sheets where you're looking at cohort penetration, cohort distribution, user behavior, you're using product analytics platform. That's the always on engine. So that's the ingestion part. How are we understanding every single day something more about our core user base and something more about the users who are not on the platform yet, but they represent your growth segments and your growth audience. The second part of that always on engine is the communication and the conversation you want to have with your users, which also there's no single way to talk to a diverse set of audiences who may be in diverse stages of the journey. So how do you test and learn? What is your supply chain of creating new creative assets, storytelling, different tone of voices based on who the user is, and different channels and touch points, because every channel and touch points has its own nuance on what works. And what works on Facebook is very different from a creative asset that will actually work on an email and drive a click through versus what may work on platform and the users come. Now, that's the always on engine. But then these spikes that you see, those are the cultural moments, or those are your key business moments. Those are your key, content moments. You don't want to overshadow them, right? You don't want to overlook them. The key is, how do you connect the two pieces? So when you do have that big cultural moment, how does that flow in and flow out into your always on engine? And that magic, that cross-pollination of campaigns every now and then, but very importantly, building that underlying always on engine, that I feel is a sustainable growth model. It is not an either or. You can't go back to the world where you do 6 campaigns and you spend millions of dollars and you just pray and pray. And you come back to see 6 months later what really happened.
Yeah, makes sense. So when you talked about outputs versus outcomes, one of the things that I think was really helpful is when you used the example of an outcome being brand. Can you share with us just anecdotally what a really good example of an output is, just so we can kind of see the difference between those and how you're defining them?
Sure. And there are many outputs. The number of campaigns you've launched, how many people saw your ad, how many people came to your site, aka visitors, how many people saw an email and clicked on it. Brilliant. But what is the outcome? Yes, they clicked on it, but they dropped off. And who clicked on it? And yes, I had this great creative ad that actually had this much click through and very low CPL, very low CPM on Facebook. How does it matter? It's 0.1% conversion rate. I have these many followers on Instagram. Are they really talking to you? Is there really a community? So there's so many of these, or if your product, we launch X many features. We have these many app downloads. Yes, do you have these many app downloads, but how, what is the MAU to DAU ratio? How engaged are those users? Do they have a consistent pattern? Is your time spent on platform going up? So that's the difference between outcomes and these are the vanity KPIs. And across many industries, we've been influenced by the vanity KPIs, especially marketing. And we have to challenge ourselves to focus on optimizing the outcome KPIs because they are more close to the business. They're more close to the core customer behavior.
Right. No, I think those are great examples. I appreciate you sharing those. And you yourself brought up Facebook. So this is where we're going to go next in our question. Facebook, Google, everyone feels like they drive a tremendous amount of traffic, but sitting in your role, obviously, at Gannett with more than 100 sites that you guys are overseeing, what really are some other platforms, if there are any, that you feel that are driving traffic significantly for you guys?
See, I come from a growth kind and engineering background. So I've worked on a few direct-to-consumer startups where you have to focus so much on driving organic traffic to your ecosystem. That is gold. Like that is the most precious stone, solitaires or whatever it is, right? And in those direct-to-consumer businesses, fortunately or unfortunately, the Googles and the Facebooks who do command platforms that do command billions of user base do command a big portion of the focus area. At Gannett, I think we have so much gold underneath where the impetus of our organic funnel is so strong because of our content. We bring 150 million users every single month organically on our platform to consume that great content, and 50 million in UK, so close to 200 million across the USA Today network. So we don't as much think about any more channels to bring people. What we think about is how do I add incremental value when they do come in my backyard? So the fortune and that we do have is there are all these people, pretty much every single person in our TAM, one way or the other, comes to our backyard. What we are doing now is how do I don't just let you go? How do I build a relationship? And how do I tell you more about us? Because I don't think I've done a good job explaining who I really am. What I do have is a magnet, which is our core content. Hence the shift from the core product is no longer the people who are coming. The core product is content. And we want to use the content to hook the person. So once you've come in, I want to figure out ways on how do I take you to yet another content and build habits. And that's the focus that we have, and less about what more doors can I open for you, because I'm pretty much touching everybody.
Right. Yeah, no, that's super helpful to think of it that way. Just one more thing that I want to think about that you could perhaps add some context to. I truly feel like when people listen to you and they see your slides, you're at, for a lot of people, an aspirational state, a state that they'd like to get to. And one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation that really stuck with me is that it's obviously a legacy industry and business, but you're trying to shift to be much more like a startup and to say, we have to be the disruptor. We have to prove to people that they want our product. And one of the things that you keyed in on was the rate of speed at which you can move, and that actually being potentially a differentiator for you. And so in all of the things that you measure, I'm most curious if you guys have a way to actually measure how you're doing at that. Can you keep note of or track your ability or the speed at which you're iterating?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Nikki. You've given me a great idea as one of our internal KPIs that I should institutionalize. But the way I would think about is usually, and again, this is a little bit of an output KPI, but I think it can be a good proxy, is the number of experiments you're doing across different functions to think about the speed at which you're moving ahead. It can also be the number of products that you're launching that are moving the needle. It can be the iteration of code changes and releases that you're doing to optimize the customer experience. I would say that's how I would think. Of course, all of us, I'm sure, on this call here are hawking our data every single day. We now have scrums where the growth teams huddle 3 or 4 times a week, cross-functionally, product engineers, data scientists. But I love that question, and I would love to institutionalize that more with that, because if speed is your core moat to move forward, you have to be able to figure out on how you're progressing on that KPI. So Maybe in the next year, if you do bring me back, I will have a more quantitative answer. But I would say definitely circling around the rate of experiments, which we have come a long way. We have an experimentation model and a team that solely focuses on designing tests and sharing results and driving through those tests. But I would love to look at a graph where we show how many tests are we doing in a given month.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And we appreciate that. We'll be tracking progress. You're welcome here anytime. And we really appreciate you taking us through this. It looks like we need to wrap up for today, but you've given us a lot to think about. And we really appreciate you kicking us off today, Mayur.
Great. Thank you, Nikki and Matt, and thanks for having me over.
Well, as promised on the agenda, I get the pleasure of introducing you to a group of people in our next session. And this is a group of people who represent a very cool project that's happening in our industry today. Mather Economics and Northwestern University have actually paired up to build a benchmarking strategy. And it's a tool that McClatchy has actually started with as well. So I'm going to introduce you and let you hear them talk about the tool, as well as how McClatchy has started to use the data and infuse it for its good. And so what I'd like to do is turn it over to this group of folks. It's Tim Franklin, who is the Senior Associate Dean from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern, Ed Malthouse, who is the Director of Research, the Spiegel Institute, and then Shannon Bowen from McClatchy, who's going to share with us again where they've used this data and what they've learned so far. So take it away, folks.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Nikki, for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be with you here this morning. So let me just give you a little bit of background about how we got to the development of this index, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues who are going to talk about how it's being used and how it can be used. So about 3 years ago, the Medill School at Northwestern University started the Local News Initiative as a way to do research and development and to use the research and development capabilities at Northwestern to help the local news industry at a time when sustainability obviously is a vital concern. So we launched this initiative. We were underway, and about a year and a half ago, we asked ourselves this question: with reader revenue becoming more essential, could we create a tool that would give local news leaders the ability to regularly measure their own performance with digital subscribers and benchmark it with peers across companies and across the country? The Spiegel Research Center at Medill had already been conducting deep data mining analysis of subscriber behaviors in more than 20 local news markets across the country. But the question for us was, could we do that type of subscriber data analysis on a mass scale monthly? So we pitched this idea to Google, which agreed to provide an innovation grant and to create the Medill Subscriber Engagement Index. And along the journey of launching this index, we were fortunate indeed to find an enthusiastic partner in Matt Lindsay and Mather Economics, and we're so happy that we did. So we've launched this powerful tool in March, and it's now being used by our first corporate partner, McClatchy. Within 3 to 4 months, this index will include about 150 news organizations from around the country, and eventually we think several hundred. Our hope is that this index, which is being made available for free, will give local news leaders the data-based insights that they need to make informed decisions to grow their digital subscribers and members at this crucial time. And so it's my pleasure now to turn it over to Shannon Bowen of McClatchy and to my colleague and friend Ed Malthouse at Medill, who are going to talk about the index, how it's being used, and walk you through some of the specifics. So Shannon and Ed, take it over.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Bowen. I'm McClatchy's Director of Product Engagement and Strategy. So my team works on reader revenue strategies, including things like personalized user journeys, our paywall strategy, and metering use cases, and audience segmentation. And we work cross-functionally with teams in our newsrooms and with sales and marketing, which brings me to interest in this tool. So when we were approached by Medill about being one of the beta publishers for the tool, we really didn't hesitate. And Ed and I are going to walk through some use cases, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why this tool really appeals to us, especially as an organization that has local publishers and that faces several data challenges. So first, we know our own progress. We have 30 news sites that we study. We are studying data every hour of the day, but we often don't really have a set of benchmarks. We don't know how we compare to other regions. Are we tracking? We know how we're tracking against each other, but how do we compare to other organizations our size and type? And the Medill tool really stood out to us to provide this kind of access. So I'll hand it to Ed now to walk through some of the charts and features of this set of this core feature of the tool.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. So our talk fits really nicely with Mayor's talk, because what we're trying to do is provide the data and the insights in a way that's comparable across news organizations. So to Shannon's point, she can go in and look at any one of our markets. So she could look at Kansas City or Sacramento or Biloxi and be able to compare how this property is doing relative to other peer markets. So we're not going to be comparing Sacramento to Biloxi, but we will be comparing Kansas City to Sacramento. So she can make these comparisons both over time and over different metrics that lead up to lifetime value. So we can see this particular property is shown in blue versus all the others in that tier. And when it comes to registered users, so this is people who are not paying currently, so very much top of the funnel, but have given McClatchy permission to send them, say, a newsletter. This property is doing better than benchmark markets, but and also that the trend is in a very good direction. As a second example, if you go down the funnel, if you look at retention rates of subscribers, again, this property is doing very well. If I were in one of these other markets, I would want to, be thinking about how can I emulate what this property is doing, and get up to their level in terms of retention rates. Just as a third example of a retention rate, of a metric tracked over time, is app usage. So what we found in our studies is that if you can get people to move into using the mobile app as opposed to using a mobile browser, they have a better user experience and the retention rates are higher. Again, this particular property is leading the way and doing a bit better than the others. And so this gives a sense for the types of comparisons that you can make. And again, this eventually will not be only McClatchy, but McClatchy is going to be able to compare itself with the Tribune or with Lee Enterprises or other publishers to see how they're doing with like markets.
Data modeling. So we're fortunate to be a partner of Mathers, of course, and also to have, internally at McClatchy, a data scientist and financial analyst and people who do modeling for a living, right? But in an effort to democratize access to this information, so our newsrooms can have the same view of outcomes and scenarios, we're drawn to a particular feature within the Medill's tool. It's called the what if scenario tool. And it helps us to easily look at revenue outcomes. So, one example, you heard Ed just talk about registered users. We have our own registration wall that we launched over the past year. And we know it's successful in increasing the rate of known users and becoming it's a great path for really getting people to subscribe to our publications. But we don't have benchmarks for it. And we don't know, we want to be able to model it easily, like to set a goal. What, if we were to increase the percentage of registered users, what will that look like in terms of revenue? And how can everyone have the same view of this model? Our answer is in one feature of this tool that Ed will show now.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. So we built this what if scenario modeling tool to try to forecast the effects of the action. So Shannon mentioned maybe increasing the number of registered users. So you're adding more people to the top of the funnel. eventually those people will become subscribers and you'll be able to hold on to them. And so this is a screenshot showing different sliders. So Shannon could increase the slider on the number of registered users. And then in a moment, I'm going to show you where she can click on submit and see what happens to the reader revenues over a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year period. So the lifetime value of those customers. Likewise, she could make changes to do a better job of retaining customers. So perhaps she introduces some new newsletter strategies or personalized news content recommenders. Well, those may decrease churn rates, and she could adjust those. She could also have a win-back strategy where she tries to reactivate customers who've lapsed. She could move those sliders as well. And so if she scrolls down, she can hit submit, and then she can see that, for example, this reader database is worth about $26 million. If she were to tweak one of those retention rates or put a greater emphasis on acquisition, what would happen to this? And then she can kind of project this forward over the 3 years and anticipate the consequences of her changes.
We have churn models like many of you. We use churn models to help find people who are likely to leave us and stop paying for their subscriptions. But often the churn models don't always answer why. And the why is really important, especially in terms that our editors or audience strategists need to know. They're looking for clues about content or about our products like newsletters, things that they can control and really have an impact on. So I really like one feature that is here in this tool. It's features churn drivers based on content. And this is based on our data about our own content and our own newsletters. Let's have a look, Ed.
Yeah, so as Shannon mentioned, we try to give some hints as to what you can do. I refer to this as unpeeling the onion to increase these retention rates. So we build 2 sets of churn models. On the left, we have what leads a customer to churn or to stay a subscriber, but often it's too hard to see so far down the road, and it's better to look at what I call the canary in the coal mine. So the canary in the coal mine is how regularly is a customer reading you. So what we've shown is that if regularity drops off, that's an early indicator that the relationship is at risk. And so, what we can do is understand what drives regularity, this habit, and what has a direct effect on churn. And so off to the right, we can see these areas of content are all associated with increasing regularity, which then is going to increase retention. So health is really all the COVID articles, and that is gold. If I'm coming to McClatchy to stay up to date on the virus situation, that's a strong indicator that I'm going to be coming back next week, which means I'm going to be paying next month as well. Coverage of professional football, local government. This market happens to have a professional football team, and so the local paper really owns that. High school sports is an important topic, state government, and so forth. However, not all things are going to drive retention. So if we look at the bottom, whatever is happening with the tourism coverage is actually driving people away. Now, we have to think maybe this has something to do with COVID, because people are not doing a lot of traveling right now. But I would also be looking at the way they're covering local real estate development. This is saying that the more people read about real estate in this property, the more likely they are to churn. Some of the other things that I'd want to look at are the coverage of local communities. This ought to be something this paper owns, but this is a hint that something is wrong with that coverage, and they need to do something different with that. I'll mention one more part of this, this churn insight tool, we can track the effects of other touch points. So McClatchy does a lot with newsletters. And what this shows is that the more newsletters that people subscribe to, the more likely they are to be retained and the more likely they are to read regularly in the future. But it also shows something quite interesting, which is if people start unsubscribing to newsletters, this is another canary in the coal mine, where this is signaling. If I start unsubscribing to you, that means something's wrong in the relationship, and you may lose me as a subscriber in the future.
And finally, I mentioned my team works on personalized experiences. That includes things like our paywall use cases. We're working on a dynamic paywall and other types of ways we can use our meter to really drive the right offer at the right time to people, as well as on-site personalization. This includes calls to action, subscription offers. And this all leans heavily on audience segmentation and what we can glean from activity and engagement for each segment, which we can also see in this tool.
Yeah, so this screenshot shows how you can track your progress in each of these different segments. So this leads us through the funnel of how are you doing at acquiring registered users who aren't paying you yet? How good of a job are you doing at converting those registered users into being paid subscribers? How good of a job are you at getting those new users to become regular users? We also track at-risk subscribers. So at-risk subscribers are those who are paying you money with a subscription fee, but they're not using the product. And so that is why they are at risk, and you'd want to do something to try to get them engaged. Help them find content that they're interested in.
Those are just a few of the use cases. And again, we are one of the beta publishers in the tool. So we're just starting to use it. We're refining our own content model to ingest into this tool as well. So our editors will have access to it. But again, I wanted to just summarize again some of the ways that I think this tool can be really helpful to publishers and especially to us. One is just the thought of democratizing data. We have a lot of people looking at data, a lot of teams within McClatchy looking at data. And, we don't want to be, no one should be a gatekeeper. We should have access to everyone should have access to data, and also the same set of data, the same view of metrics across teams. Everyone should be well-versed in, what data means and putting context around it. So we have the same view, which can help us really build consensus on our KPIs and targets. Part of my job is really to rally people around the same set of KPIs for a project. And now I think we can have a tool that can help do that. And just a few other points here. This also you saw the mod. I'm really excited about the what if tool. I'm already playing with those sliders all the time, trying to figure out well, what if I just add this, put this one up a little bit more? What would the outcome be? I think this can really help everyone just put things into perspective for the bottom line and to have a true picture of what the outcome could be. That doesn't require extensive data modeling or on our own terms. And finally, just giving benchmarks from other publishers that we wouldn't find else. We believe that we can learn a lot from each other and from other publishers, and having a view of benchmarks can really open the door to other conversations across other local news ecosystems for collaboration and sharing best practices. I already want to have some conversations with Gannett after hearing that presentation just now. So I really think this tool can open the doors for a lot of conversation and just understanding best practices and what's working.
We have a couple questions that have come in, and I know I've got some myself, and I just want to make sure we have enough time to get to them. One of the things that came in, and it's a good question, is whether or not you guys are going to be adding some definitions to the metrics. So when you talk about someone being at risk for churn, what is defined as at risk? That type of definition, I think, would help add context for people so they know kind of, since it's a benchmarking study, where they fit.
Yeah, so in the tool itself, you can hover over an item, and when you hover over it, there'll be a pop-up that gives the definition. So at risk is someone who reads you 2 or fewer days per month. So I'm rarely coming to the content.
So this might be a question more for Shannon and specifically for McClatchy and just some of the data that you found, but obviously you're studying retention, right? And recognizing that content itself provides a big propensity whether or not someone's going to churn. Is there anything else that stands out that is sort of a leading indicator and likelihood of someone to churn?
Well, we have also found that frequency really matters. Like it's not just, how many stories someone is reading when they come to us, but how often are they coming to one of our sites? And then just what are they reading a variety of content, or is it just one type of content? And that's where I'm really excited about digging deeper into the content analysis part of this feature to really understand which types of content is driving churn and then match that up with our audience segmentation for who. I also was really interested in, and I have learned a lot after using this tool about our newsletters and newsletter strategy. We have put a lot of effort into our newsletter strategy. Our newsrooms do some really great newsletters that are both, automated digest as well as some very, narrative type newsletters. And I was actually really happy to see that they newsletters and people seem to be keeping people subscribed and engaged with our products. I want to work a little bit more now on trying to figure out why people are unsubscribing and how that leads to churn, so that way we can provide people with the best experience.
Let me add just a little bit to that. I mentioned earlier that we found that people who are only using a mobile browser as opposed to the app are more likely to churn. We've have other findings, for example, with ad blockers. We found that the people who are using ad blockers tend to come back more often, they spend more time, and they're less likely to churn than those who are not using the ad blockers. And this was a finding actually we had with Gannett. I know they've been testing the effects of ad light subscription models. Or another finding that we found is that when people are reading what we call differentiated content, stuff that I can only find on that website, which could be, coverage of, local government or local sports, that tends to make them stickier. If I'm only coming to you for commoditized content, then that's, sometimes they're even more likely to churn. So, good question.
Yeah, no, that's a really good finding. And I think that is something that we expect to see, right? With native apps, you actually have to go take the behavior of downloading the app, using it. And so you tend to be a bit more loyal than someone who's on a browser experience. So, one of the things I think is really helpful is that we're seeing how people are using this. And I don't know, maybe this is a question for Tim to get him back in here as well. But we would just like to know from an editor's perspective, which of these metrics is most meaningful? And when you're asking, say, newsrooms to start measuring a whole bunch of new things that they haven't in the past, is there anything specific that you'd encourage newsrooms to start with? What's the key thing, for getting engagement that you'd say, make sure you're measuring this, if nothing else?
As an editor, I would look at those churn drivers and look at content that is causing people to be sticky and that is causing people to churn. And one thing we've discovered in the course of all this research over the last 3 years is that there's a difference between people who are drive-by readers and people who are subscribers. And there's a difference in the interests often between those two groups of people. So as we place a premium on reader revenue, I really want to know what are the content areas that are causing people to stick and to maintain their subscriptions over time. So to me, those content drivers are critical, and maybe that helps you align your resources and reorganize your newsroom around what's working and what's working with your paying customers. The other thing is newsletters, and Shannon touched on this earlier. Newsletters are so critical now in terms of building habit, in terms of being able to build loyalty and keeping people around. Are there content verticals that you can create for newsletters that come out of the insights from this index? So if you know that coverage of state government, or if you know that coverage of pro sports is a big driver in your own market, are there content specific newsletters that you can create out of those content areas. So I think that's another big advantage of this index.
Yeah. And just another quick question, just to wrap up our question session here on this, because this is really key, is when we were looking at the propensity models, and particularly in content, it was fascinating for me to see that, not surprising, health topped the list. I mean, think about the year that we've had in terms of content and what's driving people's interest and why they're coming back. And then right below it was, pro football. And for a while, that was questionable in this season. And so one of the questions I'd have is, how often those change, and if they do change with any kind of regularity over time, and whether or not you take into consideration a particular audience member that views multiple topics, or if they're viewed more linearly, and how you're taking that into consideration in the data.
So we update the churn models every month, and what we're going to be doing is offering one of the suggestions that McClatchy gave us was, can you do it on just the most recent 3 months versus the most recent year, which would allow you to kind of look at, kind of the short-term interests versus the long-term interests. And we look very, holistically across them. And so it's not just, I'm only reading football. It's a whole diet. I need to, get some local government. I need to get my health coverage, and all of those things contribute to my perception of the paper.
Right. Okay, great. Well, thanks for sharing this. We really appreciate you taking us through the project as well as your findings so far. Just want to do a shout out though. You guys mentioned that you're looking to grow the number of participants. So if you're still taking folks into the study and, those you're looking for to engage in the project, can you let everyone know how they can best get in touch with you? And we'll make sure we get that out to the group following the session.
Thanks so much for that question, Nikki. Please email us at medilindex@northwestern.edu. medilindex@northwestern.edu, and we'll get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll get that email out to everyone as well.
Thank you.
We actually have a poll for you, and we would love for you to help answer this, that we can share the results with our audience when they come back. So this is specific to products, right? Especially knowing that Mayor kicked us off and talked about the criticality of shifting our thinking here. And so when you look at this, the question is, how does your organization evolve its products? And the first answer you can have is, we have a dedicated product group that completes direct research with customers, or we work with consultants and other external resources on our product development. Third option here, we go to conferences or webinars and explore ideas that we hear and how we can successfully implement those from other publishers. Further, we are considering product changes, but have not launched them yet. Or the popular answer, are we supposed to change our products? So please let us know what you think. We'll keep that poll live throughout the break. And then when we conclude the break in just 5 minutes, we'll show you the results. Thanks. Okay, welcome back from the break. Just before we introduce our next speaker, we want to actually show the results of the poll that we kicked off our break with. What you can see up here is how people have answered the question about how does your organization evolve its products. And it looks like about 42% use events, whether that's webinars, conferences, etc., to learn about different ideas that can be successful at their organization. So interesting there, about 42%. Looks like the second one that's next highest is working with external consultants and some other resources to help on that product development. So thank you for sharing that. Super valuable for us to see that, and we'll make sure you get those results with everything else that you're getting afterwards. Up next, I'm really excited to introduce you to Claire Overstall. She is a senior vice president, and she's the global head of the customer at The Economist. And she's going to talk specifically about products, which has been a lot of our theme today. Really, they've taken some very targeted products and put that at the forefront of their subscription process. So welcome, Claire, take it away.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about engagement with our different products and why that's kind of at the forefront of our growth strategy. So as I say, we're at The Economist, we are looking, we're focusing very much on how we can grow our subscription business, same as every publication. And but we're trying to work out how to do that without spending more and more money on acquiring volume that just churns straight out the door. And And part of that growth strategy is really focusing less and less on acquisition and retention rates, and more thinking about net growth as a whole, and not just net growth in volume, but thinking about net growth in terms of revenue as well, which of course is your CLTV, making sure that your customer lifetime value is growing, either by increasing costs, increasing prices, or increasing how long a customer is with you, which is where we are choosing to focus. And engagement is obviously really key to that. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the different things that we are doing in all of our different products, and using as many levers as possible to drive that engagement, and how we're doing that throughout the funnel. So focusing on subscribers, but looking further back in the funnel as well. So fundamentally, we believe the link is really strong here. The more interested a customer is the whole way through the life cycle, before they buy, the more likely they are to convert. The more engaged they are, the more likely they are to stay with you. And then that essentially is what is going to lead to your good CLTV. So as I say, it is engagement through every stage of that funnel. And we've been thinking about, we've been breaking up our audience into these five different areas, from somebody that we don't really yet know, whose engagement with us is very light, if at all, but is also not really worth too much to us at that point. They have no lifetime value with us. And then a registered user, giving us an email address, trial subscriber, that first kind of experience with us, first year subscriber, which is really important to us, that first year one retention rate, and how important that is to lifetime value. And then your committed subscriber, which is really, those are your deeply engaged guys, who are obviously also the most valuable to you. And before I wanted to talk about the examples of things that we've been doing, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of take a step back and talk a little bit about what engagement actually means. And as we began to think about how we wanted different stages of our funnel to engage with us, we also needed to define what we wanted them to do and what our levers were to pull in all of our different products to think about engaging different people. And the four kind of pillars, I guess, that we have pulled out are content. So literally, what are we giving everybody, and in what format? Habit nudges. So this is really your marketing, but we'll talk a little bit about why it's not just marketing. Digital experience, a little bit more on the actual product side. And then the one that is probably the most contentious, or certainly is internally, about your paywall and your reg wall, and literally what you allow people to have at different stages of the funnel. So starting with content, we've been thinking about content in terms of, as I say, two different things, but primarily thinking about the format that you give to different levels of your funnel. So as we've said, anonymous audiences are worth very little to us, but obviously that's your biggest opportunity. And we want them reading articles to create that habit. So encouraging them to sign up to emails and having those links in newsletters, as we've heard about before, is obviously really, really key. But content, and then that's kind of the first screenshot on the left. But content-led newsletters, these are a little bit more, you know, these are your editorial. This is a bit more, it's not just your bread and butter. So Cover Story is our subscriber only newsletter, which brings people behind the scenes, and is something that we have seen has a direct impact on our subscribers' engagement, and therefore their renewal rates as well. So there's a direct link there, which is really interesting in terms of kind of why you would have different types of newsletters for different stages of that funnel. And then over on the right, I've put a couple of screen grabs of other things that we are testing at the moment within our products. So we've got gifting, which is one of those that it feels like it is a subscriber only feature, and therefore really nice. It's added value for a subscriber, but it's also quite good for the business, because of course, the more articles that a subscriber gives to their friends and family, the more likely you are to convert anonymous people, or certainly begin that engagement journey with them. Subscriber-only webinars is something that we launched last year for the first time, and has been a nice kind of value add for subscribers. This has driven up engagement directly after every webinar, and has led to a 7% increase in our trialists converting out of their trial and going on to become that first year subscriber. So I just wanted to give a few examples of the types of things that we are doing with content at different levels of the funnel, to drive up that engagement and therefore hopefully create a longer connection and that lifetime value. And then even within those brackets, even within the parts of the funnel, we're thinking about our audiences in slightly different ways. And here is an example of something that we launched last year to nudge our subscribers into reading more often, so becoming more engaged with us and hopefully committing for longer. So here we are encouraging engagement based on what we see people do. So we've defined usage thresholds that we need people to hit based on what it does to renewal rates. And we have created trigger journeys for subscribers to encourage them back into our products. The next step really for us is to work out what this looks like for registered users. So replicating this and bringing it further up the funnel. What would it look like to a registered user who you really may not have seen very often, or if they've just given you their email address for one article, what do you do next? How do you create this journey when they have no habit with you at all, and you need to start from scratch? And then our third one is the digital experience. So it's quite easy to think of personalization as saying, "Hi Claire," when you come onto the app, but we all know personalization is much more than that. It's really about making sure that you are hand-holding your user through the next step to make sure that they are going to build that habit, that they are building that engagement, and therefore that they stay with you that much longer. And we've been doing different things in different parts of our products. So here you've got different onboarding journeys that we're trying for new subscribers. So that trialist bucket, trying to make sure that they really understand where to go and find different things and what the different features are in the app. But we've also got the much less sexy things that do still really help. So down at the bottom you can see their payment decline notifications. Not necessarily something that drives engagement per se, but it personalizes your experience. It makes we are concentrating on whatever the reason that you are on the site, making sure that we are getting you to engage with us in order that your experience can carry on. So there's lots of different things that we've been doing, and notifications in different places, be it on the app or on the website, as you can see at the bottom. And finally, the proposition overall. So really, the paywall, where do you set that? And where do you set it in different products? And when are you prepared to flex that? So as I said, we launched subscriber-only webinars last year. And there's been huge debate about whether or not we want to keep those things as walled gardens, that only a subscriber can go to. But you may look over the fence and be like, well, I'd like to go to that, so it's worth subscribing for, versus opening it up and letting people sample. So for a couple of our events, and certainly a couple around the COVID and the vaccine, where it felt more democratic to open that up to just be on subscribers, it's been really interesting to see what it does to open it up to registered users and how much more engagement that drives, and then the kind of halo effect then of people converting to become subscribers. And the next step for us is working out whether, at the moment our paywall is set at 3 articles a month. How much do we want to flex that? Do we want to hard wall some of our articles and make those completely subscriber only, in the same way that we're already thinking about newsletters in some aspects, and potentially podcasts and things like that, versus how many do we want to completely remove any kind of paywall for people sampling via social media, for example? Different audience types need different ways, different entries into the subscription and into the product, and ultimately I think this is a test and feel way forward, and we definitely don't have all the answers here at all, any of them, in fact, as we're just at the beginning of this journey in terms of testing and identifying which things work with different audiences, and then of course what the knock-on impact is. So if you do open up an article, for example, so that you get that first click for free for social audiences, do they then go on to become habitual readers? Do they then go on to become your more engaged, and therefore push down that funnel as quickly as possible, therefore generating your lifetime value? Or are you better off forcing people to take the leap straight away and subscribe in order to come to the webinar or to get the newsletter that they can see, but they can't even sample? So that's a whistle-stop tour, really, of all of the things that we are testing and trialing at The Economist to generate those to generate that engagement at different levels of the funnel, and therefore hopefully add to our customer lifetime value.
Great, thank you, Claire, for sharing that. Naturally, we have some questions coming in for you, which is great. So I want to make sure we get to those. And for those of you who may have joined us late, just a reminder, you can submit a question. I'll take a look at it and field it to Claire, but you can do that by accessing the chat just there on the bottom of your Zoom screen. So the first one that's come in, Claire, for you is actually from one of your customers. So there you go. Always great to get this impromptu customer feedback, but this is positive. They have found really the audio feature to be much more engaging than they had originally expected. So just curious, how is that performing for you guys?
Yes, yeah, audio is a big thing for us, and as kind of custodian of the subscriber, I am advocating for it to be a subscriber-only feature, because I think it's a really nice thing. But again, you know, is it worth sampling and letting people see that feature? Yeah, audio is a big thing for us. We have always known it to be one of the most engaging features in our app. And recently we rolled it out on the website as well, so that we're just increasing the amount of different touch points that subscribers can use, or all registered users, honestly, can use that feature. So audio is huge for us, and I think understanding the difference between audio as a whole category and podcasts is something that's quite an intriguing question for us internally. Is it our articles read out that is the important thing, or is it our content delivered via audio? Because those are not necessarily the same thing. So yeah, audio for us is a big driver of engagement, subscriber engagement.
Have you seen that pick up lately? Meaning, has audio been something that's been on an uptick, or is that something that's always been successful for you guys?
Yeah, it's always something that's been fairly successful for us, because we've had a fairly long history of really good podcasts like The Intelligence and things like that. But adding the feature into our website for people to listen to articles has absolutely helped to continue the trend of it being one of the more important features in somebody's subscription. Certainly when we ask subscribers in annual surveys and things like that, the ability to listen to articles always comes out as a really key feature. I think The Economist we're very long form, and you know, being able to digest our content when you're on the move, when you're on, you know, back in the days when we commuted, or if you're on a run or what have you, it's quite an easy way to access our content. So yes, it is increasing, and we hope it will continue to do so.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and to think through just how unique the past year has been, how different mediums have really grown or shrunk, because you're right, we don't necessarily have commutes anymore, but maybe many of us are using audio as an option for when we're out and about or running or exercising. So really helpful for you to share that. And speaking of sharing, I guess one of the questions that we have is, are you guys actually sharing the data of how different content is performing back with your journalists? And how receptive are they to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are increasingly so, and certainly the webinars has been a great case study in how much we need to do that, and how much appetite there is for that in the editorial team. It obviously takes a lot of investment from editorial to source people to speak to in webinars and to run them, and certainly at the volume that we want to do them. And so they need to know how they're performing. They need to know how well they are working, and if that is worth the resource and the time and effort for them. So yes, we share, you know, as many stats as possible about the ones that have worked, the ones that haven't, or the ones that have delivered a particularly niche audience, but then we've seen real high engagement after that, but it hasn't necessarily had the same reach. So that dialogue is something that we have all the time. We have a cross-functional working group each week dedicated to thinking about engagement, and specifically thinking about kind of subscriber renewals, and that absolutely has people from editorial in it as well.
That makes sense. And I appreciate you sort of touching on the organization there at The Economist. And I'd just like to harken back to our poll that we gave to our audience here on the break. The question was really about how they're evolving products and whether or not they're using outside consultants, if they're using conferences and webinars, or if they have product teams within their own organization that are responsible for the iteration and the new features, et cetera, they're launching. So just curious, how does The Economist do it? How would you guys answer that question?
Yeah, it's a combination of a couple of those, I think. So we're in the process of working out how we diversify our product portfolio, and how we begin to think about the different types of audiences, but also the segments of audiences as well. You know, The Economist is great in its current format, but what would a shorter, smaller version of it look like, or what would a more developed product look like, as well as kind of working out the different components of products within the proposition, if you see what I mean. So both of those do two different ways of thinking about product. So we're doing a couple of different things. We've grown the product team this year, and we've begun to separate it into mission teams, more focused on engagement as a whole, or conversion as a whole. So thinking about different aspects of the customer life stage, rather than affiliating product teams to the app, for example, or just thinking about different features, I guess, like thinking more about the overall customer experience. But then we are using consultants as well to help us think about how we position our portfolio, and how different propositions will attract different types of audiences for us, and mean that we can broaden our appeal beyond our core base. So a combination is my answer.
Good. No, that's awesome. So one of the things that Ed actually mentioned in our last session, which was focused a little bit more on data and how we can measure engagement, was just how people who are using the app are much more engaged than those who are obviously on a browser. And I'm just curious, as you guys are in all formats, right? Print, digital, app, browser-based, et cetera, are you finding that people who use each of those in combination are your most engaged audience, or not necessarily?
Oh, that's a great question. So we have done a lot of work over the last year working out if engagement is going to be, you know, our North Star goal for the whole year, what does it need to be? And where do we need that engagement to be? And is it the same for everybody, or is it, you know, do we need different cohorts of people doing different things? And fundamentally, we've come up with a structure based on how much people are how many articles, or how many newsletters or whatever people are consuming. And we've tried to weight those off against each other. So if you are consuming X amount of articles in the app, or you're consuming X amount of newsletters, those two things are kind of given a slightly different weighting in terms of their importance to your engagement score, if you will, or percentage. But absolutely, the app, you know, it is our number one. It's the most important method of driving engagement, and it's both, right? It drives the most engagement, but it is also then the stickiest. So the good thing there is then that it contributes the most to our renewal rates. So yeah, driving people into downloading the app has been really, really key for us, and it's something that we've amended our onboarding journeys this year to really make sure that that's the number one thing we want people to do after they subscribe: download the app, get using the app, and then, as I showed those cards, as we begin to kind of take people through, make sure that they know where to find the different features in the app, and get them using those. In terms of the part of your question about whether it is a different combination, I think we are yet to come on to that level of segmentation to understand, as I say, the cohorts of audience that need to be using just newsletters, and that's fine, and that's enough for them to convert or to renew better, or whether there are cohorts of audience who need to be using the app and the website, for example, at different times of the day. And then, of course, the big unknown is where print fits into all of it, because print remains a huge part of our proposition, and a huge part of why people love The Economist, but it is completely unmeasurable and very difficult to work out what you need people to be doing, or what even they are doing.
Yeah, no, print is absolutely much more difficult to measure for obvious reasons. But have you found that a lot of people have moved from print to digital? Obviously, there's a push to get people there for obvious reasons. But, you know, when you think about The Economist, that's what you think of, right? And so I'm just curious if you've seen that sort of same move in groves of people who are moving to digital, and if they're leaving print behind, or if they're willing to yet.
Yeah. Well, last year, for the first time, we stopped selling print only as a product, and we entitled all of our current print only customers with digital. So we essentially, previously we'd had digital, a bundle, and print, and we removed the print option, and now we only have two. All print people are entitled to all digital entitlements. And that was really, that was a decision that we wanted to make anyway, but it felt like the right time to do it with COVID and potentially, print delays, not being able to get into some countries, and people potentially missing their copy. We felt it was the right time, quite serendipitous, if you will, that to begin to introduce perhaps diehard print fans into how The Economist could also help them digitally. In terms of whether or not we have seen an organic move of our subscriber base from print to our digital in terms of downgrading, and we do consider it a downgrade in product from going from bundle to digital. No, not really. I think the sweet spot for us is getting bundle customers using both and finding a place for both print and digital in their lifestyle. But certainly, I think if people move to digital, right now we're not afraid of that move. If it were to happen, if people were to do that downgrade, that isn't something that we are too worried about. I may come back in a year's time if we have a slimmer product that is much cheaper and is entirely digital, and we are cannibalizing our audience, then that may be an entirely different story. But so far, not a problem we're worrying about.
Well, you mentioned COVID, and obviously it's been just a unique year. I mean, it's part of the reason why we're virtual right now versus being all together in person. And I am curious, in addition to, something you brought up, which I hadn't thought about, which was getting, copies of these issues to people with some of the challenges. You guys mentioned that your paywall, and this is, the slide that we ended on, was set at 3 articles, right, before you'd hit that registration wall. And ultimately, when you guys stepped back and looked at your approach with COVID and the entire pandemic, how did you, if at all, shift your decision in terms of the article limits and whether that applied to apps differently than the articles, et cetera? Just curious.
Yeah, we did, and we watched, as I'm sure every publication does, we watched carefully what other publications were doing as well, and we made the decision that we would pick a COVID-related article, and we would make that one free. We would make one free every day. So completely remove the wall, or remove the need for even a registration for one article that we picked every day. So that was really the only kind of shift that we made in strategy as a result of COVID in terms of our paywall. As I say, this is kind of the next thing for us to work out how we begin to flex this, and whether you would do it based on content that you want everybody reading, or whether you do it based and therefore kind of the more I guess altruistic value of making sure that as many people are reading your COVID content or your election coverage or whatever. But we're right at the beginning of kind of thinking about how we would flex that. But we did make one article free during COVID.
And just in the spirit of everyone taking something away that's really valuable here, there was one statistic that you threw out there that I took note of, and I want to make sure people don't miss it. You were able to garner a 7% increase in people who are trialists moving on to actually be, subscribers. And I thought I'd captured this. I'm just wondering if you could go back, the types of content or the tool that you used to do that. I thought it was following up with a link and email to the link of the webinar, but just wanted to sort of validate that, because I think that's a really great uptick that other people could maybe take away.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually the attendance of the webinar. So we market our webinars at all subscribers, but with a particular focus on trialists. And The Economist gives everybody the first quarter at half price. And we measure, one of our main KPIs is the amount of people that move from that trial to become a full paid subscriber. And yes, that is the cohort for whom we saw a 7% uplift in that conversion rate as a result of attending a webinar. And yeah, as I say, with the follow-up emails after the webinars drive that engagement, drive the interest. But it is the attendance, interestingly, that does it. We are in the process, and I didn't quite have it finished for this talk today. but we are in the process of analysing what viewing the video of the webinar does to renewal rate, or whether it really is that attending it and feeling like you're part of something, and speaking to, having the opportunity to put questions to our journalists, which part of it is the most engaging part, because that'll be the next thing that we then try and develop from.
Great. Well, thank you, Claire, for sharing that. And I know I've hit you with a couple questions. You've handled them like a champ, but I think we have to wrap up at this point. We really appreciate you sharing. And I love the idea of making everything personal and people really knowing that, because it's not just adding your name to the top of an email now. It's really knowing them and knowing their relationship with you. So really insightful information you've shared, and we'll make sure we get copies and can share this link out with people. So thanks for your time today.
Great.
And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next it is my pleasure to introduce you all to our next speakers, which I'm going to introduce both of them briefly, and they're both going to speak, and then we'll follow up with questions for both of them afterwards. And they're going to talk about credit cards, credit card fees specifically, and saving money. And who wouldn't want to save money on credit card fees? But in this instance, it's not just about the fees that are in the operations of your business. It's actually even the e-commerce transactions that you have with your subscribers. And so first, I'm going to introduce Aaron Kocharak, who is the Senior Vice President at Oahu Publications. And he's going to actually go through a case study where they saved quite a bit of money in credit card fees. And then he'll transition that over to Sammy Papper, who is an ambassador for Media Global. And he's going to be able to describe another opportunity and way that you can actually save those credit card fees. So we'll dive right in. And at this point, I want to turn it over to, please welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Nikki. Well, I'm going to preface this presentation just by saying we're all in the same boat here. We all have the same conundrum, and that's globally, every business that swipes credit cards pays exorbitant amounts of interchange fees. And we're all trying to find ways to rid ourselves from these exorbitant fees. And at Oahu Publications, we now have done that through a cash discount program. One of our most trusted business partners that we have worked with for decades, a marketing resource, out of the Twin Cities, came to us and said, we have a cash discount program that we're currently instituting with other retailers and businesses in other spaces to great success. And we would like you to be the beta site for the publishing industry. And obviously we jumped in with 2 feet. We saw the savings that we could take off our books. And you're probably wondering, well, what is a cash discount program? Well, a cash discount program allows our clients, our advertisers, and our subscribers to pay optimal, lesser price points based on their payment type. So for instance, if a customer, a consumer of ours, pays for their goods or services via cash, via check, via money order, ACH, bank draft, they will pay a lesser price point than a consumer who chooses to pay for our goods and services via credit or debit card. Because now, with a credit or debit card, subscribers and clients will now pay a 3.99% service charge on top of what they owe us for using a credit or debit card. So your next question is probably, well, who pays for your interchange fees now? Well, a marketing resource is partnered with CNH Financial, one of the most respected and largest payment processors in the United States. Our program is completely integrated with all of our systems. We use Naviga on the ad and the circulation side. We use OSG billing on our billing side. So I'm going to give you a for instance. Nikki Purcell, you're a subscriber to the Honolulu Star Advertiser, and you're invoiced for $100. You want to use a credit card, so we accept your credit card. It runs through our cash discount system, through our Naviga system, and through the CNH system. And since you chose to use a credit card, you will see a charge on, let's say, your Visa bill when it comes back for $103.99. That was $100 for the goods and services that you purchased from the Honolulu Star Advertiser, and 3.99% for utilizing a credit card. Our nightly reconcile will come back with your $100 that we will post on your account. CNH Financial will keep the $3.99. And again, on a for instance, Visa charges CNH 2%. That's $2.08, which CNH will pay Visa. They will keep the rest as their margin. Effectively, we have eliminated all of our credit card interchange fees, and that is $1.2 million off of our bottom line. I'm going to skip this slide. I believe all the viewers are going to have access to the slides. So how did we do this? 30 days prior to launch, we had a very extensive marketing and communications program. We were very upfront with all of our clients, our advertisers, our subscribers, letting them know exactly what was going to occur. On the left here, you'll see an example of our invoice. Above the picture of the lady holding the iPad tablet, you can see that we list out full price and a cash discount price. Once again, a full price, meaning if you utilize a credit or debit card, your cash discount price, which is lower if you choose to pay us via cash check, money order, or ACH bank draft. On the right, that's a letter directly from me to all of our subscribers outlining the program, the reasons why we've chosen to go down this route. And at the bottom there, you can see there's a recurring bank draft authorization form where we're showing folks how to avoid a service charge and transition to ACH bank draft. In terms of the ACH bank draft, we actually converted, I believe, 7,000 subscribers to ACH bank draft, and we have 1/5 of all of our subscribers on bank draft at this time. Top left, you can see that's a snapshot of our advertising bill where we have our compliance verbiage and our US patents from the program, details the cash discount pricing, and details what the full pricing is. On the right, you can see that's a snapshot of what our Manage My Account portal looks like on our website, where subscribers can easily log into their account and transition to ACH or pay by credit card if they so choose. Most importantly, we took $1.2 million off our bottom line. Top right, you can see those are snapshots right out of our financials, what we were paying in credit card charges last year and what we're paying now. We're actually paying zero, even though it says 11,000 in February and 5,000 in March. Those are other fees. Those are not interchange fees. Those are fees for lockbox. Those are fees we pay to identify credit cards that are coming up for expire so we can be proactive. So our interchange fees are zero every year. It's recurring. Every year we will pay zero in interchange fees. So it's just a great success story that I'm glad we were able to be the beta site. I look forward to helping other publishers realize these types of savings. A couple other slides here before we get to Sammy. We've also chosen to sell these type of cash discount programs to local SMBs here in our marketplace who are struggling right now with COVID. Their bottom lines have been negatively impacted, and we're helping them alleviate themselves from these credit card fees. What we're doing to create a new revenue stream, for instance, ABC Hardware Store, if we can get them out of the program and they save $10,000 per month in credit card fees, what we're strongly encouraging them, hey, take part of that money, 25%, and reinvest that into the Star Advertiser, into our advertising options to help you and your business. So it's been a great revenue stream for us as well. Sammy, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what you're doing with Menio Global.
Thank you very much. Hey, Aaron, I appreciate the handoff and congratulations and job well done. OPI continues to be one of the innovators in the industry, so it's a treat to be on a panel with you. So Menio Global is best described as a broker. Think of your mortgage broker. Everybody is going through refinancing right now, right? Your mortgage broker is trying to get you the best deal possible. He or she is working to save you money, right? That's what Menio Global does. Thanks to a one-of-a-kind contract with the largest processor in the world that can't be duplicated, they literally can provide the lowest merchant processing fees in the business. The reality is they can undercut the processors, which you've heard Aaron talk about, big companies like WorldPay or First Data. They can actually undercut them because of this one-of-a-kind contract. So if you partner with Minio Global, these are the benefits you would enjoy. So let me pull up the next slide. Several things will just kind of duplicate what you learned from Aaron. At the very least, Minio Global will offer 50% savings on the adjustable processing fees you currently are paying. So if today you are paying $100,000 in annual merchant processing fees, next year you would be paying $50,000. Minio Global also has this a cash discount option where you would essentially pass through any of the fees that you are currently paying yourself to the end user, whether it be advertiser or subscriber. There are different requirements. You saw some of the verbiage Aaron used. There are different requirements by state, so it's a little bit more complicated than we want it to be, but you can pass through those fees and save 100%. Give OPI credit. They've saved all of the interchange fees. And these are the interchange fees are the fees that your local bank, whoever your bank is, typically earn. There are 3 fees associated with credit cards: the interchange, the assessment, and the processor fees. But we can, thanks to proprietary software, Minio Global can pass through the interchange fees or eliminate the interchange fees, which are typically untouchable. That's what your local banker says. This is how I earn my money, but those can be reduced dramatically. Additionally, we didn't talk about expiring credit cards. I know that publishers have lamented that challenge. In some cases, they're outsourcing this to third parties to update credit card information. Minio has automatic software that will update credit cards or new credit cards or new expiration dates. So that can be handled automatically. You don't have to worry about it. So indeed, that churn issue is gone. They can even offer a la carte pricing. So let me give you an example. We had one customer who opted for the cash discount option. That particular, it was a standalone business publication, expects to save $40,000 in credit card processing fees this year. They were worried that an account might say, gee whiz, I'm not happy about this. So we don't have to turn that on account, quote unquote. We can do it account by account. We can charge consumer accounts one way or not pass through the fees at all to an advertiser if indeed that was appropriate for you. So an a la carte pricing is an option. And again, you can back off, do it differently, treat different customers in different ways. Next up, we ask for a month-to-month commitment, or Minio Global does. It is easy to, if you find a better deal, it's easy to move on. Just let us know, give us a 1-month notice, and we're glad to help the transition to the next company. Since there are multiple countries and currencies represented on this conference, I thought it helpful to know that Minio could process in 175 countries right now and via 37 currencies. So it is an international company. While we probably are not doing this in most cases in the newspaper space yet, we're also processing in alternate payment methods like Apple Pay or even crypto. In many cases, Minio is providing equipment, either at wholesale or, depending on the type of equipment required, possibly for free. The Minio offers a rate guarantee. We will meet or beat any legitimate offer you receive from someone else. And if we cannot, then again, we will help with the transition to make sure you're in a great position to move on to another carrier, a processor, if you so choose. Minio has, this is one of the real beauties of it. They have a very significant customer service team. You don't have to deal with WorldPay directly or First Data directly or any of the big processors. That personalized service is what allows them to have top-rated, AAA rated, Better Business Bureau ratings. You would have access to that as having to go, as opposed to having to go to the traditional processor. You would have Minio as your customer service team. And a couple of last points. I thought it helpful to know what the size Minio is. Most people haven't heard of processors, certainly haven't heard of brokers, right? In calendar year 2019, they processed $90 billion. The company was founded 11 years ago. They work with brands like many of the Hilton brands, Burger King, McDonald's, Hertz Rental Car, and again, many brands that you would recommend and you're probably using. And the last point I would make that I thought of belatedly, so I didn't add it to the slide, is as we've talked to newspapers, because we've talked to a handful of newspapers, there always seems to be a reluctance. There is a worry that this is really a hard deal to do. It's like you or I calling up AT&T and changing to T-Mobile. We just really don't want to go there. Or the last time we changed processors, it was really difficult. So let me just offer a couple of thoughts on that point. Minio does a really extensive analysis before there is processing. Yes, there is paperwork. Yes, there's some basic documentation they need, but they do the heavy lifting. So on the switch over date, it should go seamlessly. Minio is fully integrated with a handful, probably not all of the systems you presently use, but Braintree, Naviga, Salesforce, et cetera. They have access to 800 programmers. So if an integration issue presents itself, they have the horsepower to make a change occur. And I would say probably lastly, two lastlies, many say, well, gee whiz, I'm in a contract. I have a contract with so-and-so right now. Well, that may very well be the case, but in almost all cases, I've stumbled into a couple, this is not true. The changed contract fee is like $500. I mean, it's really very easy to swap out of a contract. Not for everybody, but most. And then finally, it is absolutely obvious to me that indeed the industry, the newspaper industry, which I've served for 35 years, is paying too much in this category. I've just sent a proposal to a company that will say this is a Midwestern independent group of newspapers, a total of 15 titles. They will say between $50,000 and $283,000 next year. I mean, just significant savings. And then as another example, a independent newspaper in the Great Northeast, they also have interests in retail, will save between $25,000 and $375,000. It's just clear to me that this is a huge opportunity for operators, and that perhaps the processors, the local banks, have enjoyed their relationships with you. So I say it's time for us to either eliminate to the tune of 50% or all the way up to the cash discount option and eliminate 100% of your fees. If ever there was a time to reduce these fees, now is when consumers and advertisers would understand. So with that, I thank you for the time, and nice working with you, Aaron, and I'll lean on you, Nikki.
Right. Thank you, Sammy, and thank you, Aaron, for being with us today. And just a couple questions before we have you take off. But Aaron, I think you threw a lot of math at us, which I want to unpack. But the first math I'm going to throw back at you, if I'm accurate on this, is that it's about 7 a.m. in Hawaii. So big thank you to you for joining us so early, because I know that that's sometimes a challenge. We have a global audience here on a lot of different time zones. So one of the questions that came in around, shifting really from credit card to the ACH transition is the question around how newspapers have historically done grace periods, and how that shift sometimes can have an impact on the actual payment processing or prolong when they expire. As you guys transition that, Aaron, can you share with us what you saw in that space specifically?
Really no change, because once a credit card is processed, that night we're receiving that reconciliation back from C&H Financial, our payment processor, and that is going right into our system. So there has been no change with our grace period or our grace expenses. Everything was seamless, and it's just one of the many reasons why we chose to go down this route and execute this program.
Okay, what about recurring payments, right? Obviously, we have a lot of customers who are on that, and the credit cards are super easy for that. And the ACH, I would assume, is the same, but I don't know how automated that is. So that's a question we have, is if it impacted recurring payments at all.
No, we want as many subscribers on recurring payments as possible, even if that's credit or debit card. Obviously, we would prefer to have folks on bank draft ACH. The best part of bank draft ACH is bank accounts do not expire. Credit cards and debit cards expire. Bank accounts do not. Therefore, procrastination works in your favor. Everyone always says they're going to cancel Netflix, and everyone always says, I'm going to cancel the local newspaper, but they never do because they're on recurring payments.
Right. So does it take longer to process through bank accounts? We were thinking that that had a little bit longer time period on it. And obviously there's cash value with money there.
Well, we have 3 batches that we do every month. We do deductions on the 1st, the 5th, and the 20th, and it's the same every month, and it's seamless. So there's been really no change to the timing of our processes.
Okay, great. Another question came in, and maybe this makes more sense to you, so I'm just going to kind of read it as is. How do you handle NSF on bank drafts?
No change on that. No change on that either. If there was an NSF, obviously we're gonna get the notification from the bank. We're gonna call the subscriber, let them know what occurred, collect payment via another method. Don't really have that many NSF. We have more credit card expirations and declines for sure, but NSF has not been a problem for us whatsoever.
Okay, well, it looked like from the letter that you shared with us, which was an important part of this, which was the communication, right, to the subscribers of how this would change. Looked like that was dated October 2020, if I saw that correctly. When did you actually kick off the program? And are we just about 2 quarters in?
We kicked off the program 1/1 of this year.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we are, 4 or 5 months into the program, and it's been very successful. Like I said, $1.2 million off our books in one fell swoop. So let me just put that in perspective. If you were to net $1.2 million on the revenue generation side, you would have to find a $6 million gross revenue generating program at a 20% margin to net $1.2 million. How many $6 million revenue generating programs do you think are out there, folks? Not that many. So $1.2 million off our bottom line was a huge coup for our company. No doubt about it.
Well, and I think anyone would agree it would be a huge opportunity for anyone's company. And as Sammy said, we've probably been paying these fees more than any of us would like to admit for far too long. So any new options are really of interest. And one of the things that I have always been impressed with, Aaron, in our history and where our paths have crossed is that you guys have found an opportunity to take something that's been successful for you and then also take it to the market and learn where else you can have, positive impact for others. So just curious, when you guys take, this and try to offer it to others, what does the format of that look like? You talked about them saving money and reinvesting back in their business, but are you managing the communication for them, the actual program itself? Like what piece of that are you packaging and taking to them?
You mean other publishers?
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. We're a very entrepreneurial spirited company. We're very innovative. We want to help ourselves first and foremost. But, I'm not a vendor or a business partner. And for the vendors and business partners on this call, don't take offense to that. But, I have a lot of friends and colleagues in this industry that I want to help. And they've helped me over the years. So when we have a successful initiative like this, we definitely want to share that with our peer group. And I think we're late to the game. And I think Sammy would agree with this. In the publishing space, we're late to the game on these types of cash discount initiatives, but we're not too late. It's not too late to implement it, especially in these COVID times where I know most of our bottom lines have been negatively impacted. And there's just absolutely no reason one wouldn't execute this strategy, in my opinion.
Great. Well, as I said, when I kicked this off, I definitely think that there's a lot of interest in this area and everyone wants to be able to find opportunities to save money. So I appreciate both of you coming on today, sharing with us the programs, but also being very transparent with the savings and the actual numbers. I think that's an important part to back what it is that you're experiencing, and being that vulnerable and sharing this with us has been really, really helpful to our audience today. So thank you both. As I mentioned when I walked through the agenda, each of the days of our symposium, we were rounding out the day with a spotlight on a different industry. And today we're able to bring you the Major League Baseball. And so when we think about our propensity to get people to subscribe and our consumer journey, so much of that and what we talk about is unique to our industry. What we found is that some of these things are actually quite similar in other industries. And that's why we're super excited today to have John Tierney with us. He is the Senior Director of Ticketing Major League Baseball. And I'd like to introduce him and give him a warm welcome. Thank you, John, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Thanks for having me. And thanks to everyone at Mather Economics for inviting me. I think, it's an economics company, running the sessions here when we're ahead of schedule for a conference. I don't know how many of those that I've been into, but I guess that's part of the nature of the virtual conference. And, when I saw I was presenting last, usually that is the last session is before happy hour. So I know I'm not holding that up, especially with Aaron in Hawaii at 7 a.m. and people all over the place there. So hopefully I can keep everybody's attention for a little bit longer here. So yeah, I think you hit on it, Nikki. You said, as I joined some of the presentations earlier today and seeing everything from yesterday, there's more similarities, in our industry than maybe I potentially realized. And, certainly things are much different, as you'll see, I'll talk about here. We're a little bit more events based. But there's, and we're further behind, I think, probably, in a lot of initiatives. But there are a lot of similarities, and hopefully there's a couple of interesting things here you can take away and compare. So I'm going to go through the ticket holder customer life cycle, and really, for us in baseball, there's 4 stages there. There's acquiring the customer, onboarding them, engaging with them during their term, their subscription, and then retaining them. So we'll start off with customer acquisition. I think. Back in the day, when I first started working in baseball, and I'm sure that, there's some baseball fans on here, and, maybe you've, gone to games, had tickets, and maybe even had season tickets. But, there was a time when everything was communicated, via traditional phone calls or just, even emails. And going back further, when I first started in the industry, I had colleagues at the New Jersey Nets who they didn't even have an email. Their email came from New Jersey Nets group sales at AOL.com. So, we've certainly come a long way from there. And then the sophistication continues to get greater. And again, I think probably, a lot of the folks on this call are maybe a little bit further ahead of us, or have been doing this for a longer time. But, some of the things that we've shifted to over the past few years is just in general paid media. And I don't think that's necessarily new, but kind of the targeting that goes around it. The example here is a little bit small of the New York Mets, but just, we're just able to meet customers where they are, wherever that might be, and just targeting them based on, characteristics that they've shown, a propensity to be interested in us, versus just, kind of the spray and pray type method of advertising. And taking it a step further, we're talking about phone calls and emails, just the AI and sales automation piece. There's only a handful of our clubs that are really getting into this, but it's become an area that everyone's identified as an area for growth, in the near future. So you can see Nicole Johnson in the bottom right there. Nicole Johnson does not work for a team. She's not a real person. But, for example, if we know that, there's 100,000 people who bought merchandise, we'll just throw a team out there, the Indians. And I have to say the Cleveland professional baseball team at this point, because they'll be changing their name. But, we know that they've bought merchandise but never bought a ticket before. They might be a good candidate, they may not be, but the hit rate on those customers, might be a little bit lower than someone who has a ticket purchase history. So, what's an effective way to go through those 100,000 leads? It isn't necessarily to be emailing them individually or making those traditional phone calls. There just isn't enough, sales rep activity to be able to do that. So using this sales automation and having a virtual sales assistant go and hit up all these people individually with a somewhat personalized message, but that's automated. And then, based on their level of engagement, then transferring them over, to a live sales rep to kind of, further the sale and close the sale. So again, this may not be something that's new to anybody on this call, but it's relatively new to the sports world, the baseball industry. And it's paying immediate dividends. It's been a real difference maker. The next thing I'll throw out there is just from a text messaging perspective. And again, this isn't anything necessarily new either. But, historically text messaging, from a rep to a prospective buyer, maybe that's done on their personal device. There isn't a ton of tracking and there isn't, a ton of oversight into it. It's evolved to the point here where we can involve this text messaging, into be connected with the CRM system, be tracked. Again, it's small on this page, the green and gray text there, have campaigns that run through it, allow customers to text in. So, we're seeing, over 95% open rate on text messages versus, the email open rate varies quite a bit depending on the audience size and the campaign. But the text message has a much greater open rate, and also allowing people for an inbound text. Maybe not everybody wants to, get on the phone and talk to someone. They might be able to transact via email. So just, again, meeting the customers where they are. So those are just a couple of high level things, that we're doing there. And I'll get into a little bit more of, as I'm, noted here, some in-house metrics, events, customer email journeys, and omni-channel marketing that, again, just trying to find different creative ways to leverage, our brand, our live events, and lean into that and meet customers where they are and try and acquire them the best way possible. So talking about, using data and analytics, which I think, hopefully resonates with a lot of folks here. Our data science and analytics team developed a metric that we call a fan avidity or team avidity metric. And it's based on all the fans' digital interactions with MLB and its clubs. So that can be anything from an email list they join, whether they use one of our apps and they've selected a favorite team, combining that with attending a game, utilizing MLB TV or our streaming product, or just generally spend on, again, tickets, but also merchandise and anything else they're interacting with the team. So, there isn't necessarily a ticket purchase history, which makes someone more likely to become a ticket holder for sure. But there's all these other signals that are saying, these fans are interested in the team, and potentially we should be reaching out to them, whereas we may not have in the past. And this has become especially key in the past 15 or so months because last year we didn't have any fans buying tickets, or rather we didn't have any fans attending games. So those numbers were down quite a bit. So how can we be engaging with new customers and ramping up for the time now as we're getting increased attendance across the board, with all our clubs, to be able to fill those seats, versus starting from scratch. And so I mentioned earlier leaning into kind of what we're good at and what's special about us. Our events, obviously not just hosting games, people, love to come to baseball games, be outside in the summer, all that. But, all the other things that go along with it, the players, alumni, all the things that are our assets that are unique. How can we leverage them? And hosting an event, a sales event isn't new. I think it's just a combination of, a couple of examples of events that Tigers did here, but just the lead sources, where they're getting this from the people that purchased, not necessarily from the team, but from the secondary market, people they've surveyed, going back to the paid media targeting, people that look like the existing customers we have, and based on a bunch of other factors. And when we get folks down to the ballpark, the close rate is just so much better. When they see and feel the energy of the event, whether it's a game or just interaction, with some of our alumni or players, we're always going to do better. I think that's probably true of any industry, but we have so many opportunities to do that. And, more and more teams have evolved into this model. Obviously that was paused quite a bit in the last year plus, but we've tried to do it from a virtual perspective too, to limited success, not as much as in person. So we're certainly looking forward to leveraging the in-person aspect and getting people, back to our ballparks and other venues where they can interact in person. So I mentioned, from an email marketing perspective, omni-channel marketing, we call them customer journeys, and I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with them, either something they've implemented on their side, or they've just been a customer that's gotten it. And so again, I don't think this is necessarily something new. It's relatively new for us, but just trying to give a snapshot here of the combination of the customer journeys, combining email and all the other marketing assets. So there's a lot of different campaigns noted at the bottom here, but I have a generic one at the top. Just, we have games coming up. I think our ticket purchase history, across the board for all teams is pretty consistent. As we get closer to the game, more folks are interested in coming. So, engaging with them then. If they don't, engage with that email, if they don't open it, click it, etc., they go down one path. If they do, they go down another. And combining those emails with different ads, Facebook is noted here, but it doesn't have to be Facebook. And just meeting people where they are. If they're engaging with our content, just giving them as many touch points as possible to put it in front of them and hopefully convert to a purchase. So just, increasing our total marketing output, and it's proved to drive incremental sales. So I think we'll see a lot more of it. There's a bunch of examples at the bottom of the different, product and fan behavior driven campaigns we have and can continue to do, but I think we're seeing a lot more of that, from our teams. And that's something that we at the league are helping implement. But every team has a different strategy and way they go about it. So there's a bunch of different ways there that we're acquiring customers, right? And that's a lot of times is the hard part. Once we get them in the funnel, hopefully they'll stay with us. But there's a lot of steps to make sure that they do stay with us. So, after we're acquiring the customers, we need to onboard them. And I'm sure everybody has their own different onboarding process. And I think there's a lot of things that I'll share that aren't necessarily different from anything you all might have be doing. But, starting with just, especially in this day and age, the webinars and personalized videos, I think, it's harder to do the in-person stuff. And I have a Braves example and a Royals example here. Tried to utilize as many teams as possible because I don't know who's a fan of what team out there. So trying to touch as many as possible. But just there's so much new information out there. There's so much information anyway when you become a ticket holder. As far as getting to the game, where you're going to park, how to get to your seats. Where you can visit concession stands, how you can order on your phone for food. Digital ticketing is not necessarily mandatory, but we're getting close to that point where everyone is there's no really paper tickets out there. So for our new ticket holders, we want to make sure we're engaging with them, and so they have a good experience when they get there, knowing everything that they can beforehand. So whether it's these lunch and learn type webinars or just personalized videos, to allow clubs to better connect with their clients, and giving their sales reps an ability to create personalized introductions and custom content. And as I said before, with the text messages doing much better than emails, video-based emails and personalized emails certainly do better than regular emails. So to the extent that we can continue to personalize it and do the video-based stuff, we've seen good engagement there. Another example, just going back to again leveraging what we're good at with events. I think everybody probably shares the fact that their first year, their rookie, however you classify your rookie accounts, as less likely to renew. It's no different in baseball and sports. And rookie can vary from just their first year, or it can be a couple years. Particularly now, we have some people who decided to buy season tickets late in 2019. Maybe they attended 1 or 2 games then. They didn't attend any games in 2020, and they've only been able to do a couple this year based on capacity. So, the definition of rookie can vary, but there's special attention paid to these folks because they're less likely to renew. Once they've been around for 3, 4, 5 years or beyond, they stayed for a reason, and they're more likely to stay on. So, what can we do specifically, for these account holders to make them feel welcome, to help them learn, especially, in this time when they haven't been able to attend as many games. So there's a lot of, neat things that teams do, in order to, have them be comfortable with their service rep, to learn how to, manage their tickets. And, again, events-based stuff, getting them down to the ballpark or other areas, to really give them the tender love and care, to make them, feel wanted and have a good experience and want to come back. And then, just to kind of sum all of it up, and again, I'm sure everybody, listening here is doing, different versions of touch point campaigns. I think the first 2 slides on onboarding were different versions of that, but just kind of trying to give the full scope of the things that our teams try and do to get in front of these customers as many times as possible, make it as personal as possible, gather as much information. And whether it's tangible items, there's a Mariners example here of kind of the welcome packet they get and all the different, little pieces that they get, to, the individual visits in person, whether it's at games or just meeting up, and then, behind the scenes stuff and just, speaking, et cetera. So, I think it's all about engaging with our customers, and onboarding them is the first step in that. And really the most important. But there's plenty of people that aren't rookie accounts that we need to engage with too. So I can talk a little bit about what the engagement looks like in general with all ticket holders here. So going back to, again, I've said it many times now, just the events-based stuff, that's our greatest asset. People, love coming to the games, and that's where we have the best opportunity to engage with them. So you can see here an example of the Brewers. They have a season seat holder headquarters. So the people that are spending the most money, with the club, they have a special place, on the concourse at the game. It's only for them. They have all kinds of stuff that they will, host there in normal times. They'll have players there. You can pick up, bobbleheads and other items, and you can always find somebody there that can answer your questions and help troubleshoot, anything you might have. And then there's, some Marlins examples of just, again, events-based stuff before a game, come a little earlier, there might be a player or a coach or somebody, alumni speaking, just giving them an opportunity to get an extra level of engagement, food and beverage or reward, tickets, parking, whatever it might be. And then the last thing from a game day perspective, something the Braves do, which I think is really neat, is, they have a VIP or concierge service. So, we have, just like you all, there's businesses that are customers, and then, there's the regular consumers, the B2C folks. But so anybody could fall into this, but thinking mostly about businesses, a lot of times you're buying tickets for client entertainment. So, you're giving your client tickets to the game and you're hoping they have a good time, but there's so many things that could happen, when they're there that you can't control. And so the Braves have a concierge service they set up so that, they can let their, season ticket service rep know, maybe we can make sure the mascot can visit. Maybe we can make sure, they get some kind of, promo pack, a gift bag to get to them. Maybe we can make sure just somebody checks in on them and makes sure they're having a good time. Anything that we can do to make sure that our clients, and ultimately our clients are getting value out of their investment, and the game day is the best place to do that. But also there's plenty of opportunities for non-game day, and something we've had to lean into the past year. So those non-game day events can also be at the ballpark because people love to come down there and they get to do behind the scenes type stuff. But also, there's an example, I think this is the Twins, like they do a boat cruise. There's all kinds of trips, and folks spend a lot of money to come to baseball games, and the teams want to make sure that they get value out of that and make it, a 365 day a year, product. It's not just, hey, come to the games when they're on. It's, let's engage with you the entire off season, the entire season. And, going to baseball games is just part of the package. It's not everything that you get to it. And so just like everybody else, we had to pivot a little bit in the past year plus to do some of this engagement virtually, and the teams got really creative there. So you can see some examples of, conference calls, town halls, Instagram live sessions with players, managers, general managers, and then even something like direct outbound call campaigns. The Tampa Bay Rays had their radio announcers, and those are voices that people are probably familiar with, because if they're listening and engaging in games, make calls just to check on people proactively and say, hey, hope you and your family are doing well. We're thinking about you. If you have any questions, let us know. And, we're looking forward to getting you back at the ballpark. So anything, might resonate differently with a different customer. So trying to do that, in as many ways as possible. And kind of to that point, there's a Twins example here of something they did. It's, there's folks that are the hardcore fans that want to hear from the general manager, the manager, or even the players. But there's a lot of aspects of baseball teams. There's trainers, there's groundkeepers, there's dietitians, there's photographers, all that stuff. And the Twins had a kind of a learn from home from the experts thing. So they did some physical fitness stuff. I had a coworker the other day sending me a picture, text message of his yard. He was very proud after he had mowed his lawn. Some people are into that. Wouldn't you like to know, if you're into that, how to put the cool lines that they have at the baseball stadiums, in your lawn. So again, just how many ways can we engage with our customers that might resonate with them, and it might be different for everybody. So that's a cool idea from the Twins, and other teams have done something similar. It doesn't just have to be the baseball personnel that you can engage with. There's so many aspects of the team. So we acquired the customers. We onboarded them, we're engaging with them, and especially during COVID, it's even harder. So some cool examples here. I think anybody who watched a sporting event in 2020 is familiar with some kind of fan cutouts. A bunch of teams did them. Everyone likes seeing themselves on TV. So that was a fun thing that we hopefully don't have to do again. But it was successful for a bunch of teams. And then just again, positive, proactive, personalized outreach with a couple cool bells and whistles. The example all the way to the right here is from the Pirates. Last year, obviously, there were no fans in attendance. In baseball games, the games are going on. There's still foul balls. The ball's hit out of play. And if a ball landed in the seat that you would have been sitting on as a season ticket holder, the Pirates sent a little note in the ball itself saying, we wish you were here, but you would have had this foul ball if you were here, so we wanted to send it to you. So just all those little touch points, anything we've been doing to, again, going back to leveraging our live events and making sure our customers are feeling the love. And then finally, this is kind of an evolution that isn't new, certainly, in the world, but for baseball a little bit too. We've always had fan clubs, and I think, maybe even in European soccer, there's been, some of these kind of membership at home products too, based on their international fan bases. But we have that in baseball too, and so there's a Dodgers example here, and a bunch of teams are leaning into this, and it's something that will stay. We think, even when we return to 100% capacity and normalcy, there's fans that can't necessarily attend games, but they do want content from the team that's special to them, and the equivalent of being a season ticket holder, but without having season tickets. So what does that look like? And so the Dodgers example here, there's gift boxes, there's content that's exclusive to the Dodgers and home members, and all kinds of other interactions. And again, it's something that potentially, down the road, even when we do, it came out of, not being able to have fans in the ballpark, but at the same time, it's something that, will likely stay. So we're talking a little bit about, engagement here. Hopefully we've given people a good experience, and hopefully they'll want to come back, but just like everybody, we have to do, some efforts to retain them. And I think the first thing is kind of a no-brainer that everybody's been doing for a long time. It's a little bit slower in the baseball and the sports world. Most teams are on auto renewal now, and I think everybody will be shortly. But just helping us identify our at-risk accounts earlier in the process, and giving them, an opportunity to eliminate a lot of the logistical work and making things smoother. So again, I know in a lot of the industries that we have, on the Zoom here, have been doing this for quite some time. So it's not necessarily new. And, we talked a little bit before about customer journeys, and that was more from a sales perspective. I have an example of a renewal one here from the Nationals. So we're required to have that opt-out window, whether it's 2 weeks, a month, whatever it might be, for someone at the end of their membership. And so, you can see the, dues notification email. And then based on their action, if they don't take any action, that's simple. They're just going to get the welcome back and renew. And if they want to stay on, but change, what their plan is, have more games, less games, a different location, they have a whole different path. And then, if they decide that they don't want to come anymore, kind of what that process looks like, just making sure that we give them a lot of opportunities to stay on board and voice their concerns, and make sure they're fit in the right spot. And then, again, not unlike a lot of other industries, but just, kind of the different renewal touch points. Just hold a snapshot here. This one's actually from the Toronto Blue Jays. Just, based on someone's likelihood to renew, the different metrics that we use to determine that, the different touch points that we're going to give everybody, to whether it's email, phone, in-person type visits, throughout the kind of renewal cycle, to make sure that the most at-risk accounts do get the extra attention and their concerns heard, and hopefully keep them renewed. And then last thing that I'll share, and I know there's some questions and looking forward to answering them, just, the other personalization that we can give people, versus just the regular, everyone emails, calls, et cetera. But, the e-brochure products that we use, countdown clocks and interactive, and you can see your invoice and all that stuff. Those cost money. Their third parties are used to do them, but there is a return on investment that teams find. And then, when teams don't have the budget to do that, there's other, unique ways that we can leverage all the data we have to still, give the customer that personalized experience. So there's an example at the bottom here. It's, hey, you should renew because you've been to 391 games with us. You've seen 215 wins. You've saved almost $50,000 in all your time as a season ticket holder. So, all the different ways that we can combine the data and information we have on customers in order to paint them a picture of, why they've had a good experience. So I'm from New York. I think I probably talked too quickly there. I went through a lot of stuff, but hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of our process at a high level with a bunch of examples from teams. So I'm happy to answer any questions that there might be on here.
Great. Thank you, John. We love your pace. So it worked for us and we appreciate it. Yeah, you probably did see the chat window come up quite a bit. There's a lot of questions and we'll get to them here in just a second. So we really appreciate you sharing with us today. And I'm going to do my best to look through those and pitch you questions. And now that I think about it, I should probably stop making baseball reference puns because they're probably only funny to me. But nonetheless.
No, that's another casualty, Nikki, of the virtual conference. I was on at the beginning when you said it was going to be a home run at the end. I smiled, but you didn't get to see everybody else do it. But they're landing over here at least.
Okay, that makes me feel so much better. Yeah, because it's only funny and I'm only laughing to myself. So that's helpful to know. Okay, great. Well, one of the things that I think was really present in your conversation was that there really are so many more similarities to the publishing world and the world that we live in to what you expressed with Major League Baseball. And I just got to say, one of the things that stood out to me is how you guys focused on keeping that relationship and that engagement going in what would be just crazy, unprecedented times, right? So the idea that you would take the sports psychologists that you have access to and turn that into content so people could help with mental, health and that sort of thing, or even the groundskeepers on giving tips on how to keep their lawn. Or the other one that I think I took note of was around how to be physically fit at home and utilize the trainers to help give that kind of content. That starts to embark in a content world. And so, just curious where some of those ideas came from, if they came mainly from the league or individual teams, and then you guys picked those up and shared them along the way. That's just interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a combination of all those. Just like everybody else, for a couple weeks or a couple months last year, we were trying to figure out what to do, right? And there was, a lot of, negative stuff out there, right? Just in the world. And then, we had to cancel some games and refund some tickets. And there's all those conversations. So how can we shift the narrative to be more positive and still use the assets that we have to have proactive outreach? I think I said a couple of times, which is important. I think the teams that did that had a lot better relationships with their customers versus just, taking inbound calls and saying, we'll get back to you, going out and just leaning into it. But I mean, every market is different. Every team is different. They all have different good ideas. And when we agree that they're good ideas, or when the team reports back that they've had success, we try and amplify it across the board. And not everything's going to work in every market necessarily. I think most of the stuff that I tried to share are things that hopefully would work, in every market, but that's not always the case. So it's just, knowing the individual teams and how they're set up, how they're structured, how they, operate, and, what kind of resources they have to be able to pull something off, and sharing with them, what we see. Well, it doesn't just need to be baseball, right? It's from anywhere. I mean, there were a lot of the fan cutouts. I think it was, German soccer teams that started it, maybe. I mean, the stuff comes from all over the world. A good idea is a good idea. And if we can find a way to implement it and execute it, that's what we're always looking to do.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot that people can take away from this. And, regardless if the tactic doesn't translate exactly, sometimes the medium can be. And I think one of the questions that came in that would be helpful is whether or not you guys saw success in any particular type of platform. So when you were trying to increase engagement and keep those relationships, did text messaging, for example, work better than, say, webinars, or did email sort of increase in terms of open rates? If those mediums are consistent, right, between the publishing industry, Major League Baseball, what have you, we'd just be curious to see if any of those rose to the top in terms of engagement for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to not answer the question directly, but I think it depends on what content you're looking to get across. Like if we're talking in the ticket holder world, that might be different from just people who are interested in watching the games, right? I mean, video has certainly been king. From a baseball perspective, people want to watch the highlights and engage that way, and that certainly worked, as I noted, even some of the personalized examples. But it's about meeting the customers where they are and where they want to be some people, especially from a ticket perspective, making sure they're comfortable with what their path looks forward to attend games. They want to do it on the phone. Some of them are more comfortable doing it via text message. So generally, I would say, to answer the question, video is always better, but different teams have different abilities to make personalized videos, or just really kind of cool behind the scenes content. So it's whatever resources the teams have available. And just going back to being proactive and being positive, that's where the most success was. Whatever it was, people liked hearing from the teams, because that's something good, that they can recall and look back on. And so, rekindling those memories with, showing, highlights of old games, because we couldn't have existing ones, right? From past years when the team was successful, anything like that really seemed to resonate pretty well.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And, one of the things that we've experienced is a lot of us have really increased the number of emails. And so when you were showing the consumer journey, and it was sort of the decision point, did they open the email? If yes, then this, if no, then this. One of the questions that I have, and just thinking about, even our own work, at Insight, at the company that I work for, is with that increase in email, have you guys seen where sort of the threshold is? Or have you set any kind of boundary which says, okay, this is too many. We've hit them. We've bombarded them. That's when sort of we opt out, because you went through, the majority of a season, right, where you didn't have anyone coming into the stadium, and that may have been one of the, few channels that you could use.
It's too many. I think everyone would agree that, based on, who doesn't have a, secondary email account that they sign up for stuff with, right? So it is too many, but it's cheaper. And it is still effective, right? Maybe the open rates aren't as high, and maybe the engagement isn't as high as it once was, but people still relate to it. And that goes more back to the personalization and the journeys based on their activities. If someone is not responding to the email, and I don't mean literally responding, but clicking on it, opening on it, then let's let it go. They're not going to engage with us that way. For the people that are, then maybe those are the ones that we can lean into it a little bit more. And engage with them in different ways. It's not the same email over and over again. Let's be creative, based on the activities that they've taken. We, run campaigns when someone, goes through a purchase flow and abandons, and, teams are creative, like, hey, we caught you looking, like, I know you like the baseball pun. So, so stuff like that, when people are engaging, it's when they are, reading the emails, opening the emails, clicking the emails, or whatever, form we're communicating with them, then let's continue with that more because they've engaged. And when they aren't, let's not push it too much.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a fan of the baseball puns or if I'm just really good at them, John.
Both,
right. So we are very excited that baseball season is back in our household, and I live in Dallas, so we have a brand new stadium to go visit here in the Dallas area. So that's something that's getting people back, in addition to just the season. And I think that our audience would like to know how you're seeing ticket sales going so far. Everyone was wondering what would happen in a post-COVID world. Would people be rushing out to take advantage of some of the things that we've missed so much, or are they still hesitant? And we just love your insight on how it's going so far.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is market by market. Generally, the demand for the tickets we have available is strong. I think capacities are limited, depending on the market. So, down there in Dallas, the Rangers, they are at 100% capacity, and they do have a new ballpark. So that certainly helps to have a new ballpark. But in some other places in the country, we have, 20, 25%, 30% capacity. So there certainly is demand there. And hopefully, as the summer goes on here, our attendance is always better in the summer. Things are all trending in the right direction, right? We've gotten a few announcements in the past couple of days about teams being able to increase their capacity. I think, hopefully the demand will continue to increase, as capacity increases. And, but it's really a little bit market specific. And it's also we talked about season ticket holders, season ticket members, throughout the presentation here. Those are the folks that are getting to come to the games a lot more than the individual ticket holders, just because there's only a certain amount of tickets available, and they're the best customers. You want to give them the first crack, the first opportunity. So hopefully, as the summer goes, we'll just be opening up to more people to have access to, to more games, better seats, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up the Texas Rangers. And so this is actually a question that came in. Our Texas Rangers let's just say we're not leading the pack in terms of win-loss record. It's early, you never know. But one of the questions that came in is, when you have seasons for different teams that have different win-loss records, and maybe someone's on a path, of success and others not so much, do you have different playbooks based on those seasons and how the records are going and the team overall in terms of your overall engagement and really just keeping those fans?
Definitely. There's two things that I've learned in working at MLB and baseball for 12 years to be incontrovertible facts. One is I can never get all 30 teams to agree on something, the same thing. It's hard to get everybody to agree. And two, the best practice that you can share to help increase ticket sales is to have a good team and win the World Series. But only one team can win the World Series every year. And there's 30 teams. Some of them are going to win the games and some of them are going to lose them. So the teams that, don't have as good a season, it's certainly more of a challenge than the teams that have a winning season. I think if teams are doing well, they'll leverage that success. Say, hey, like if you come now, you can get an advantage to be here for the postseason when we play, in the championship series or World Series, something like that. The teams that aren't doing well don't have that leverage. But it goes back to creating that kind of 365 a day a year product. What are the other things that we can do and offer instead when that isn't the case anymore? You can still come to the games and you can still have a good time. The good news is even our worst teams still win, 60 plus games a year. So there's still an opportunity to have a good experience and experience, a winning game, even if the team isn't having a great season. But doing all the other events and all the other, bells and whistles that we have at our disposal to offer, teams will certainly lean into them a little bit more in a situation where they don't, have as much success on the field.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And, one question just to sort of wrap us up today, and we appreciate you taking the time to walk through this. We have heard throughout the day just how important really apps are for engagement. So people have seen, tremendous success with getting people who are taking the time to download the app and getting notifications and alerts, et cetera, to keep them as engaged sort of subscribers. Obviously, you run a very different business with the Major League Baseball, but I noticed from going to the game, we have made it out to a game so far this year, that we use the app to access our, paperless tickets now, as well as to be able to have the code, scanned for parking. Have you guys looked at the app as an opportunity for engagement in doing things other than just functional for, say, getting into the game like I just described? And I'm wondering if that's, consistent among what we've heard today.
Yeah, 100%. And, I'm probably not the best person to speak on all this. That, at MLB, there's plenty of people who spend more time, working on it than me, but we have a bunch of different apps. We have the MLB app, which is really for more of engaging with, the game itself. You can access MLB TV and watch games in there, see all the stats, highlights, all that good stuff. You use the Ballpark app, which is, it's essentially the concierge for you when you go to a game, anything and everything that you might need: parking, merchandise, concessions, your tickets, all that. And then all the other fun stuff that teams do in ballpark with games and such. And then, we have other apps like Rally app, which is another like engagement, app if you're not at the ballpark, in that space. So, we don't have one app, one destination for everybody, but certainly the engagement on them is up this year over past years. And we'll continue to lean into it to, get customers from one app to the other based on what they're looking for, and, make sure, we can leverage any opportunities they might be interested in.
Okay, great to hear it. Thanks again, John, for joining us today, and really appreciate you taking us through this.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
I'm going to turn it over to Matt now to wrap us up for the day, give a highlight for what we've seen, and set us up for the last session of the symposium. Matt, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, that was an awesome session. Thank you, John. Great to have you on. Always interesting to see how other industries. Sorry, I did that wrong. I'm going to go back one slide. I was going to say, always interesting to see how similar business practices and challenges translate across industries. So great day too. Thank you to everybody that came in today. Awesome content. Just to recap, starting with Mayor from Gannett. And again, we'll have a lot of these presentations and recordings on our site so people can watch them if they didn't catch them live or you didn't get to see all of them. I thought it was fantastic how he talked about how, again, the product in the industry used to be the audience. We used to which is, interesting how that's evolved now that the distribution is the advertising is not the primary revenue stream. Really, content is the product, and that's what we need to obsess about and focus on as a business. He came up with 5 core principles. He actually added a couple more at the end there, but won't go through all of them all. But just really fantastic, excellent presentation, and we'll definitely recap it there. We then had the Medill folks talking about. We're very excited to be working with Medill, and McClatchy is kind of the pilot client there. We are having a process right now where we're onboarding a lot of our clients that have both the listener pixel and our subscribers data that we receive are going to be part of that very quickly. We moved from there to Claire Overstall at The Economist. I'm a big fan of The Economist as a longtime subscriber, so I enjoyed the Q&A that we had with her, hearing about everything they do to monitor engagement with the products and how they track and measure engagement. The sales funnel, which is, again, everybody, sales funnel is a common concept, but it's interesting to hear how the tactics they use to move people down that funnel with habit nudges and the digital experience and registration and so on. The combination panel between Aaron and Sammy, that was something we included because a lot of the ideas we talked about during this conference thus far are revenue generating. We wanted to include something that was on the practical side, which is just an easy way to save expenses, and reducing transaction costs or something that generally is a win-win. It improves the customer experience. It saves you money. And as Aaron pointed out, effectively, it drops right to the bottom line. So whatever your margin percentage is, it's a multiple of that you'd have to grow the top line to get that same effect. So he noted that to make another $1 million in profit, they would have had to grow revenue $5 or $6 million. And then lastly, you all just heard John of Major League Baseball, John Tierney. They're a business we've enjoyed getting to know, and I'm a big baseball fan as well. So it's fun to hear kind of how that happens behind the scenes. So thank you again. We will reconvene on Monday. I hope you all are able to join us. We have another great round of speakers there, and Nikki will continue to be our wonderful moderator. So thank you all for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you on Monday. Take care.